Can you guys hear the music playing? This doesn't work if you don't hear the music playing. I knew I was in trouble the moment she entered my room with a smile that could make a demon confess. Hello. Hello, hello. Let's turn the volume down a little bit there. And hey, we're joined by Damon. Oh, hello, Damon. We're ready to read Skin Trade. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the happy birthdays. Yes, technically tomorrow, August 31st, is my birthday, but I'm on a 3-day weekend. Labor Day is also Monday, so we're going to have a weekend full of streaming, and we're going to read Skin Trade, George's gritty crime noir werewolf thriller. This is the long-awaited follow-up to the vampire stream I did with David Lightbringer. Unfortunately, this is not a story that we'd be doing on Dave's channel. I said it is a gritty crime noir, and there are a lot of problematic elements to the story that will get the stream demonetized within the first few minutes. On my channel, I'm more keen on doing those darker aspects. I censor myself when I'm on other people's channels because I don't want to be the reason their streams get demonetized. But since I only do YouTube as a hobby, I don't really care. So we're going to do the darker stories and talk about the darker topics. That being said, this is the one and only trigger warning. The Grey Waste is not a safe space. I'm not going to say grape when I mean rape. I'm not going to say unalive when I mean murder or kill. I'm not going to do all the stupid crap that YouTube requires of content creators to censor themselves. If we want to talk about these topics, we need to be able to use the words. Another thing is there is a lot of foul language in this story. Thankfully, not fever dream levels of racial slurs, but a lot of use of the F word where sometimes sentence structure can reach fuck the fucking fuckers levels of speech. These are hard-nosed police and detectives and with our main characters. There's also, if you saw in the video info or you saw in my Twitter post, there are themes of German nationalism that will come up in this. So yeah, we're going to be discussing Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, and the friggin' Nazis. So again, I'm not going to say the Austrian painter or the mustache man when I mean Hitler. We're going to say these things. So now that I have made sure that the stream is thoroughly demonetized, we can jump into the story. And yes, it is a crime noir. I have the jazz music playing. This story starts off with the feeling that if it was a movie, it should be in black and white. That it gives like that 1940s vibe again. It's like, get out of here, toots. These streets ain't what they used to be. I can't keep up with these fast-talking dames. Of all the sinkholes in this city she could have wandered into, she had to fall into mine. And that will bring us, but yeah, so there's a lot to talk about, and we will bring them up as we go into it, obviously. We know that George never likes to get rid of a good idea, and there will be elements that come up in the story that he will have used in A Song of Ice and Fire, but we may as well just go straight into it. And if the jazz in the background gets annoying, just let me know. I'll turn it off. But I'm just trying to set some ambiance. And of course, this is Werewolf Stream. I am wearing my Robb Stark. Sorry, Damon. I am wearing my Robb Stark t-shirt, the crown, wolf's head, skull, and the blue roses. So, because we are going to be talking a lot of House Stark, as well as a lot of House Bolton. The crimes that are committed, the murder here is flaying. It is flaying people, skinning them, wearing their skin. It also is women. Women are the primary victims of the flayer. And fun fact, so this story came out in 1989, and just 1 year earlier, 1988, we have the release of the book version of Silence of the Lambs. Most people probably are more familiar with Silence of the Lambs due to the 1991 film version starring Sir Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster, in which the killer, Buffalo Bill, abducts women, kills them, skins them in order to create a skin suit. So I'm not going to go into that whole thing because that goes into other uncomfortable territory that I do not have the expertise to talk about. I just think it's interesting that these two stories that involve flaying women and turning them into skin suits came out one right after the other, so close together. So we will. There I am. Okay, now we can start the story. So, the skin trade. George R.R. Martin. Willie smelled the... I'm just going to turn the jazz just down a little bit so I can hear myself better. Right. Willie smelled the blood a block away from her apartment. He hesitated and sniffed at the cool night air again. It was autumn, with the wind off the river and the smell of rain in the air. But the scent, that scent, was copper and spice and fire. Unmistakable. He knew the smell of human blood. A jogger bounced past, his orange sweats bright under the light of the full moon. Willie moved deeper into the shadows. What kind of fool ran at this hour of the night? Asshole, Willie thought, and the sentiment emerged in a low growl. The man looked around, startled. Willie crept back further into the foliage. After a long moment, the jogger continued up the bicycle path, moving a little faster now. Taking a chance, Willie moved to the edge of the park where he could stare down her from the street. Oops. Taking a chance, Willie moved to the edge of the park where he could stare down her street from the bushes. 2 police cruisers were parked outside her building, lights flashing. What the hell had she gone and done? When he heard the distant sirens and saw another set of lights approaching, flashing red and blue, Willie felt close to panic. The blood scent was heavy in the air and set his skull to pounding. It was too much. He turned and ran deep into the park, for once not caring who might see him, anxious only to get away. He ran south, swift and silent, until he was panting for breath, his tongue lolling out of his mouth. He wasn't in shape for this kind of shit. He yearned for the safety of his own apartment, for his lazy boy, and a good shot of Primatine mist. Down near the riverfront, he finally came to a stop, wheezing and trembling, half drunk with blood and fear. He crouched near a bridge abutment, staring at the headlights of passing cars and listening to the sound of traffic to soothe his ragged nerves. Finally, when he was feeling a little stronger, he ran down a squirrel. The blood was hot and rich in his mouth, and the flesh made him feel ever so much stronger. But afterwards, he got a hairball from all the goddamn fur. Willie, Randy Wade said suspiciously, if this is just some crazy scheme to get into my pants, it's not going to work. The small man studied his reflection in the antique oval mirror over her couch, tried out several faces until he found a wounded look he seemed to like, then turned back to her to let her see it. You'd think that. You'd think that of me. I come to you. I need your help. And what do I get? Cheap sexual innuendo. You ought to know me better than that, Wade. I mean, Jesus, how long have we been friends? Nearly as long as you've been trying to get into my pants, Randy said. Face it, Flambeau, you're a horny little bastard. Willie definitely changed the subject. It's very amateur hour, you know, doing business out of your apartment. He sat in one of her red velvet wingback chairs. I mean, it's a nice place, don't get me wrong. I love this Victorian stuff. Can't wait to see the bedroom. But isn't a private eye supposed to have a sleazy little office in the bad part of town? You know, frosted glass on the door, a bottle in the drawer, lots of dust on the filing cabinets. Randy smiled. You know what they charge for those sleazy little offices in the bad part of town? I've got a phone machine. I'm listed in the yellow pages. AAA Wade Investigations, Willie said sourly. How do you expect people to find you? Wade, it should be under W. If God had meant everybody to be listed under A, he wouldn't have invented all those other letters. He coughed. I'm coming down with something, he complained as if it was her fault. Are you going to help me or what? Not until you tell me what this is all about, Randy said. But she'd already decided to do it. She liked Willie, and she owed him. He'd given her work when she needed it, with his friendship thrown into the bargain. Even his constant, futile attempts to jump her bones were somehow endearing, although she'd never admit it to Willie. You want to hear about my rates? Rates? Willie sounded pained. What about friendship? What about old times' sake? What about all the times I bought you lunch? You never bought me lunch, Randy said accusingly. Is it my fault you keep turning me down? Taking a bucket of Popeye's Extra Spicy to an adult motel for a snack and a quickie does not constitute a lunch invitation in my book. Willie had a long, morose face with broad, rubbery features capable of an astonishing variety of expressions. Right now, he looked as though someone had just run over his puppy. It would not have been a quickie, he said, with vast, wounded dignity. He coughed and pushed himself back in the chair, looking oddly childlike against the red velvet cushions. Randy, he said, his voice suddenly gone scared and weary, this is for real. She'd first met Willie Flambeau when his collection agency had come after her for her unpaid bills left by her ex. She'd been out of work, broke, and desperate, and Willie had taken pity on her and given her work at the agency. As much as she hated hassling people for money, the job had been a godsend, and she'd stayed long enough to wipe out her debt. Willie's lopsided smile, endless propositions, and mordant intelligence had somehow kept her sane. They kept in touch off and on, even after Randy had left the Hounds of Hell, as Willie liked to call the collection agency. All that time, Randy had never heard him sound scared, not even when discoursing on the prospect of imminent death from one of his many grisly and undiagnosed maladies. She sat down on the couch. Then I'm listening. What's the problem? You see this morning's courier? The woman that was murdered over on Parkway. I glanced at it. She was a friend of mine. Oh, Jesus. Suddenly, Randy felt guilty for giving him a hard time. Willie, I'm so sorry. She was just a kid. 23. You would have liked her. Lots of spunk. Bright, too. She'd been in a wheelchair since high school. The night of a senior prom, her date drank too much and got pissed when she wouldn't go all the way. On the way home, he floored it and ran head-on into a semi. Really showed her. The boy was killed instantly. Joni lived through it, but her spine was severed. She was paralyzed from the waist down. She never let it stop her. She went on to college and graduated with honors, had a good job. You knew her through all this? Willie shook his head. Nah, met her about a year ago. She'd been a little over-enthusiastic with her credit cards. You know the tune. So I showed up on a doorstep one day, introduced her to Mr. Scissors. One thing led to another, and we got to be friends. Like you and me, kind of. He looked up into her eyes. The body was mutilated. Who'd do something like that? Bad enough to kill her, but... Willie was beginning to wheeze. His asthma. He stopped, took a deep breath. What the fuck does it mean? Mutilated. Jesus, what a nasty word. But mutilated how? I mean, are we talking Jack the Ripper here? I don't know. Does it matter? It matters to me. He wet his lips. I phoned the cops today, trying to get more details. It was a draw. I wouldn't tell them my name, and they wouldn't give me any information. I tried the funeral home, too. A closed casket wake. Then the body is going to be cremated. Sounds to me like something getting covered up. Like what? Willie sighed. You're going to think this is real weird, but what if? He ran his fingers through his hair. He looked very agitated. What if Joni was, well, savaged, ripped up, maybe even, well, partially eaten, you know, like some kind of animal? Willie was going on, but Randy was no longer listening. A coldness settled over her. It was old and gray, full of fear, and suddenly she was 12 years old again, standing in the kitchen door, listening to her mother make that sound, that terrible, high, thin wailing sound. The men were still trying to talk to her, to make her understand. Some kind of animal, one of them said. Her mother didn't seem to hear or understand, but Randy did. She'd repeated the words aloud, and all the eyes had gone to her, and one of the cops had said, Jesus, the kid. And they'd all stared until her mother had finally gotten up and put her to bed. She began to weep uncontrollably as she tucked in the sheets. Her mother, not Randy. Randy hadn't cried. Not then, not at the funeral, not even in all the years since. Hey, you okay? Willie was asking. I'm fine, she said sharply. Jesus, don't scare me like that. I got problems of my own, you know. You look like, hell, I don't know what you look like, but I wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. Randy gave him a hard look. The paper said Joan Sorensen was murdered. An animal attack isn't murder. Don't get legal on me, Wade. I don't know. I don't even know what an animal was involved. Maybe I'm just nuts, paranoid, you name it. The paper left out the grisly details. The fucking paper left out a lot. Willie was breathing rapidly, twisting around in his chair, his fingers drumming on the arm. Willie, I'll do whatever I can, but the police are going to go all out on something like this. I don't know how much I'll be able to add. The police, he said in a morose tone. I don't trust the police. He shook his head. Randy, if the cops go through her things, my name will come up, you know, on her Rolodex and stuff. So you're afraid you might be a suspect, is that it? Hell, I don't know. Maybe so. You have an alibi? Willie looked very unhappy. No, not really. I mean, not anything you could use in court. I was supposed to see her that night. Shit. I mean, she might have written my name on her fucking calendar for all I know. I just don't want them nosing around, you know? Why not? He made a face. Even us turnip squeezers have our dirty little secrets. Hell, they might find all those nude photos of you. She didn't laugh. Willie shook his head. I mean, God, you think the cops would have better things to do than go around solving murders? Oh God. Okay, I'm just pulling out because as someone who also has like a, I guess we would say, low opinion of police at times. That one, better things to do than solving murders. The dogs of the state. I haven't gotten a parking ticket in over a year. Makes you wonder what the hell this town is coming to. He begun to wheeze again. Now I'm getting too worked up again, damn it. It's you, Wade. I'll bet you're wearing crotchless panties under those jeans, right? Glaring at her accusingly, Willie pulled a bottle of Primatine Mist from his coat pocket, stuck the plastic snout in his mouth, and gave himself a blast, sucking it down greedily. You must be feeling better. When you said you'd do anything you could to help, did that include taking off all your clothes? Willie said hopefully. No, Randy said firmly. But I'll take the case. River Street was not exactly a prestige address, but Willie liked it just fine. The rich folks up on the bluffs had river views from the gables and widows' walks off their old Victorian houses, but Willie had the river itself flowing by just beneath his windows. He had the sound of it night and day. The slap of water against the pilings, the foghorns when the mists grew thick, the shouts of pleasure boaters on Sunday afternoons. He had moonlight on the black water and his very own rotting pier to sit on any midnight when he had a taste for solitude. He had 11 rooms that used to be offices, a men's room with a urinal, and a ladies' room with Tampax dispenser, hardwood floors, lovely old skylights, and if he ever got that loan, he was definitely going to put it in a kitchen. He also had an abandoned brewery down on the ground floor, should he ever decide to make his own beer. The drafty red brick building had been built 100 years ago, which was about how long the flats had been considered the bad part of town. These days, what wasn't boarded up was industrial, so Willie didn't have many neighbors, and that was the best part of all. So, we're not given the name of a city here, but it does sound like it gives the feel of like cities like Detroit in the 70s when the recession came in, when steel mills were closing down, when car manufacturers were going out, back when Germany and Japan became real powerhouses, and we saw the steady decline of American manufacturing and that sort of feel, and also just the crime spike that happened in the 70s. Like New York City in the 70s, not compared to relative. Not to say New York City is all that safe, but it's much safer than it was 4 decades ago. Yeah, Chicago. It's that Detroit, Chicago. It's definitely a Midwest thing. I think George wrote this while he was living out in the Midwestern states. So parking was no problem either. Willie had a monstrous old lime green Cadillac, all chrome and fins, that he left by the foot of the pier, 2 feet from his door. It took him 5 minutes to undo all his locks. Willie believed in locks, especially on River Street. The brewery was dark and quiet. He locked and bolted the doors behind him and trudged upstairs to his living quarters. He was more scared that he'd let on to Randy. He'd been upset enough last night when he'd caught the scent of blood and figured that Joni had done something really dumb. But when he'd gotten the morning paper and read that she'd been the victim, that she'd been tortured and killed and mutilated. Dear God, what the hell did that mean? Had one of the others? No, he couldn't even think about that. It made him sick. And yeah, so here we see, just like we can apply in A Song of Ice and Fire, sometimes when you hear the word others, it's supposed to make you think of the White Walkers. And in here, yes, one of the others is referring to the main monster of our story, which is werewolves. Was it a werewolf? His living room had been the president's office back when the brewery was a going concern. It fronted on the river, and Willie thought it was nicely furnished, all things considered. None of it matched, but that was all right. He'd picked it up piece by piece over the years, the new stuff usually straight repossession deals, the antiques taken in lieu of cash on hopeless and long overdue debts. Willie nearly always managed to get something, even on the accounts that everyone else had written off as a dead loss. If it was something he liked, he paid off the client out of his own pocket, 10 or 20 cents on the dollar, and kept the furniture. He got some great bargains that way. He had just started to boil some water on his hot plate when the phone began to ring. Willie turned and stared at it, frowning. He was almost afraid to answer. It could be the police, but it could be Randy or some other friend, something totally innocent. Grimacing, he went over and picked it up. Hello? Good evening, William. Willie felt as though someone was running a cold finger up his spine. Jonathan Harmon's voice was rich and mellow. It gave him the creeps. We've been trying to reach you. I'll bet you have, Willie thought. But what he said was, yeah, well, I've been out. You've heard about the crippled girl, of course. Joan, Willie said sharply. Her name was Joan. Yeah, I heard. All I know is what I read in the paper. I own the paper, Jonathan reminded him. William, some of us are getting together at Blackstone to talk. Zoe and Amy are here right now, and I'm expecting Michael any moment. Stephen drove down to pick up Lawrence. He could swing by for you as well, if you're free. No, Willie blurted. I may be cheap, but I'm never free. His laugh was edged with panic. William, your life may be at stake. Yeah, I'll bet, you son of a bitch. Is that a threat? Let me tell you, I wrote down everything I know, everything, and gave copies to a couple of friends of mine. He hadn't, but come to think of it, it sounded like a good idea. If I wind up like Joni, they'll make sure those letters get to the police. You hear me? He almost expected Jonathan to say calmly, I own the police. But there was only silence and static on the line, and then a sigh. I realize you're upset about Joan. Shut the fuck up about Joni. You got no right to say jack shit about her. I know how you felt about her. You listen up good, Harmon. If it turns out that you or that twisted kid of yours had anything to do with what happened, I'm going to come up to Blackstone one night and kill you myself. See if I don't. She was a good kid. She. Suddenly, for the first time since it had happened, his mind was full of her. Her face, her laugh, the smell of her when she was hot and bothered, the graceful way her muscles moved when she ran beside him, the noises she made when their bodies joined together. They all came back to him, and Willie felt tears on his face. There was a tightness in his chest, as if iron bands were closing around his lungs. Jonathan was saying something, but Willie slammed down the receiver without bothering to listen, then pulled the jack. His water was boiling merrily away on the hot plate. He fumbled in his pocket and gave himself a good belt of his inhaler, then stuck his head in the steam until he could breathe again. The tears dried up, but not the pain. Afterwards, he thought about the things he'd said, the threats he made, and he got so shaky that he went back downstairs to double-check all his locks. Okay, so I do want to stop here and just start discussing some of the aspects of the story. So we have now, not on screen, but through telephone conversation, we have met Jonathan Harmon, who is a big power player in the city. Old money, owns the newspapers, probably, as Willie suspects, most likely owns the police, or at least has some on his take. And he, just to put it out there, he has a very Roose Bolton feel to him. The killers are quiet. But he also has a son named Stephen who is not right in the head. And we'll see when we meet Stephen. There's very much a sort of Roose and Ramsay Bolton vibe going on between these two. But at the same time, he has the name John. So we can also keep Jon Snow in the back of our minds. Also, the names of these families. There are four main families, the founding families of this city. They are the Harmons, the Flambeaus. So we met Jonathan Harmon and our main protagonist, Willie Flambeau. There's also the Anders and the Roquemonts. And let me just bring up my notes here. So Harmon is German for soldier. Flambeau is French for torchbearer. So Willie is a Lightbringer. Anders is German for manly, brave, or strong. And Roquemont is Old French for rock hill or strong hill. So you notice of the four founding families, two are of Germanic origin and two are of French origin. And we'll get into this later. This has a lot to do with some German nationalism, which comes as a result of the Franco-Prussian War. We'll get into this more when we meet Jonathan in person and we hear his whole spiel. But yeah, it's also so Flambeau, French for torchbearer. So yeah, so Willie is a light bearer, a light bringer, if you will. So now we move on to the next section. Courier Square was far gone in decay. The big department stores had moved to suburban malls. The grandiose old movie palaces had been chopped up into multi-screens or given over to porno. Once fashionable storefronts now house palm readers and adult bookstores. So again, we're looking at like the squalor that came in the 70s when a lot of things started shutting down and being replaced by like these more seedy, insipid things. And now in our time, the malls that replaced the old mom and pop shops, now they're closing down or becoming ghost towns as brick and mortar stores die. So we're in the next generation of urban squalor. If Randy had really wanted a seedy little office in the bad part of town, she could find one on Courier Square. What little vitality the square had left came from the newspaper. So some of you and the older folks in the audience might know this. Others, for people like me, I didn't grow up with this, but I could hear stories from my mom and my dad about these times. They came of age in the 70s. They were born in the 60s, so they were teenagers and young adults in the 70s and early 80s. The Courier building was a legacy of another time, when downtown was still the heart of the city and the newspaper its soul. Old Douglas Harmon, who'd like to tell anyone who'd listen that he was cut from the same cloth as Hearst and Pulitzer, had always viewed journalism as something akin to a religious vocation, and the Gothic Deco edifice he built to house his newspapers looked like the result of some unfortunate mating between the Chrysler building and some especially grotesque cathedral. 5 decades of smog had blackened its granite facade, and acid rain had eaten away at the wolf's head gargoyle that snarled down from its walls. But you could still set your watch by the monstrous old presses in the basement, and a Harmon still looked down on the city from the publisher's office high atop the iron spire. It gave a certain sense of continuity to the square in the city. So the feel of it is almost like a modern day Dragonstone. And you can imagine a present if Planetos were to exist in the modern day, a modern day Targaryen staring down. The black marble floors in the lobby were slick and wet when Randy came in and out of the rain, wearing a Burberry raincoat a couple sizes too big for her, a souvenir of her final fight with her ex-husband. She'd paid for it, so she was damn well going to wear it. A security guard sat behind the big horseshoe-shaped reception desk beneath a wall of clocks that had once given the time all over the world. Most were broken now, hands frozen into a chronological cacophony. The lobby was a gloomy place on a dark afternoon like this, full of drafts as cold as the guard's face. Randy took off her hat, shook out her hair, and gave him a nice smile. "I'm here to see Barry Schumacher." "Editorial, 3rd floor." The guard barely gave her a glance before he went back to the bondage magazine spread across his lap. Randy grimaced and walked past, heels clicking against the marble. So again, like this guy is at the front desk of the police station is just openly reading some bondage porn. So you get a feel of, again, like the grittiness of this. I said I feel like 40s jazz to be playing, but really this is a lot more like a 70s dirty cops Scipio type, or I'm blanking on the name of that 70s movie about the cop who tried to clean up the department, but you get the feel I'm going down to. Like, it's like dirty cops all the way down. The elevator was an open grillwork of black iron. It rattled and shook and took forever to deliver her to the city room on the 3rd floor. She found Schumacher alone at his desk, smoking and staring out his window at the rain-slicked streets. "Look at that," he said when Randy came up behind him. A streetwalker in a leather miniskirt was standing under the darkened marquee of the castle. So again, yeah, like right across the street from the police station, a prostitute is just out there in broad daylight. The rain had soaked her thin white blouse and plastered it to her breast. She might as well be topless, Barry said. Right in front of the castle, too. First theater in the state to show Gone with the Wind, you know that? All the big movies used to open there. He grimaced, swung his chair around, ground out his cigarette. Hell of a thing, he said. I cried when Bambi's mother died. In the castle? She nodded. My father took me, but he didn't cry. I only saw him cry once, but that was later, much later, and it wasn't a movie that did it. Frank was a good man, Schumacher said dutifully. He was pushing retirement age, overweight and balding, but he still dressed impeccably, and Randy remembered a young dandy of a reporter who'd been quite a rake in his day. He'd been a regular in his father's Wednesday night poker game for years. He used to pretend that she was his girlfriend, and he was waiting for her to grow up so they could get married. It always made her giggle, but that had been a different Barry Schumacher. This one looked as if he hadn't laughed since Kennedy was president. So what can I do for you? He asked. You can tell me everything that got left out of the story on that Parkway murder, she said. She sat down across from him. Barry hardly reacted. She hadn't seen him much since her father died. Each time she did, he seemed grayer and more exhausted, like a man who'd been bled dry of passion, laughter, anger, everything. What makes you think anything was left out? My father was a cop, remember? I know how this city works. Sometimes the cops ask you to leave something out. They ask. Them asking and us doing, that's two different things. Once in a while, we'll omit a key piece of evidence to help them weed out fake confessions. You know the routine. He paused to light another cigarette. How about this time? Barry shrugged. Hell of a thing. Ugly. But we printed it, didn't we? Your story said the victim was mutilated. What does that mean exactly? We got a dictionary over by the copy editor's desk. You want to look it up? I don't want to look it up, Randy said, a little too sharply. Barry was being an asshole. She hadn't expected that. I know what the word means. So you're saying we should have printed all the juicy details? Barry leaned back, took a long drag on his cigarette. You know what Jack the Ripper did to his last victim? Among other things, he cut off her breasts, sliced them up neat as you please, like he was carving white meat off a turkey, and piled the slices on top of each other beside the bed. He was very tidy. Put the nipples on top and everything. He exhaled smoke. Is that the sort of detail you want? You know how many kids read the Courier every day. I don't care what you print in the Courier. I just want to know the truth. Am I supposed to infer that Joan Sorensen's breasts were cut off? You can't handle the truth. No, I didn't say that, Schumacher said. No, he didn't say much of anything. Was she killed by some kind of animal? That did draw a reaction. Schumacher looked up. His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw a hint of the friend he had been in those tired eyes behind their wire-rimmed glasses. An animal. Is that what you think? This isn't about Joan Sorensen at all, is it? This is about your father. Barry got up and came around his desk. He put his hands on her shoulders and looked into her eyes. Randy, honey, let go of it. I love Frank too, but he's dead. He's been dead for, hell, it's almost 20 years now. The coroner said he got killed by some kind of rabid dog, and that's all there is to it. There was no trace of rabies. You know that as well as I do. My father emptied his gun. What kind of rabid dog takes six shots from a police 38 and keeps on coming, huh? Maybe he missed. He didn't miss, Randy said sharply. She turned away from him. We couldn't even have an open casket. Too much of the body had been. Even now, it was hard to say without gagging, but she was a big girl now, and she forced it out. Eaten, she finished softly. No animal was ever found. Frank must have put some bullets in it, and after it killed him, the damn thing crawled off somewhere and died. His voice was not unkind. He turned her around to face him again. Maybe that's how it was, and maybe not. It was a hell of a thing, but it happened 18 years ago, honey, and it's got nothing to do with Joan Sorensen. Then tell me what happened to her. Look, I'm not supposed to... He hesitated, and the tip of his tongue flicked nervously across his lips. It was a knife, he said softly. She was killed with a knife. It's all in the police report. Just some psycho with a sharp knife. A knife. Bigger knife. Bigger knife. Fucking knife! He sat down on the edge of his desk, and his voice took on its familiar cynicism again. Some weirdo seen too many of those damn sick holiday movies. You know the sort. Halloween, Friday the 13th. They got one for every holiday. All right. She could tell from his tone that she wouldn't be getting any more out of him. Thanks. He nodded, not looking at her. I don't know where these rumors come from. All we need, folks thinking there's some kind of wild animal running around killing people. He patted her shoulder. Don't be such a stranger, you hear? Come by for dinner some night. Adelaide is always asking about you. Give her my best. She paused at the door. Barry? He looked up, forced a smile. When they found the body, there wasn't anything missing? He hesitated briefly. No, he said. Barry had always been the big loser at her father's poker games. He wasn't a bad player, she recalled her father saying, but his eyes gave him away when he tried to bluff, like they gave him away right now. Barry Schumacher was lying. The doorbell was broken, so he had to knock. No one answered, but Willie didn't buy that for a minute. I know you're there, Miss Jetica, he shouted out through the window. I could hear the TV a block off. You turned it off when you saw me coming up the walk. Give me a break, okay? Open up. I'm not going away. Inside, a child started to say something and was quickly shushed. Willie sighed. He hated this. Why did they always put him through this? He took out a credit card, opened the door, and stepped into a darkened living room, half expecting a scream. Instead, he got shocked silence. They were gaping at him, the woman and two kids. The shades had been pulled down and the curtains drawn. The woman wore a white terry cloth robe, and she looked even younger than she'd sounded on the phone. You can't just walk in here, she said. I just did. When he shut the door, the room was awfully dark. It made him nervous. Mind if I put on a light? She didn't say anything, so he did. The furniture was all ratty Salvation Army stuff, except for the gigantic big screen projection TV in the far corner of the room. The oldest child, a little girl who looked about 4, stood in front of it protectively. Willie smiled at her. She didn't smile back. He turned back to her mother. She looked maybe 20, maybe younger, dark, maybe 10 pounds overweight, but still pretty. She had a spray of brown freckles across the bridge of her nose. Get yourself a chain for the door and use it. And don't try the no one's home game on us hounds of hell, okay? He sat down in a black vinyl recliner held together by electrical tape. I'd love a drink. Coke, juice, milk, anything? It's been one of those days. No one moved. No one spoke. Oh, come on. Cut it out. I'm not going to make you sell the kids for medical experiments. I just want to talk about the money, yo, okay? You're going to take the television, the mother said. Willie glanced at the monstrosity and shuddered. It's a year old and it weighs 1 million pounds. Okay, yeah, so, people growing up in the 80s and 90s, you remember the giant tube TVs that were like the size of your entire back wall? And they cost thousands of dollars even in those days. Like this is what we're talking about here. That wolf in the thumbnails, like that dog in the burning house meme. This is fine. Yeah, in the oh, you're talking about the Robb Stark with the arrows in his yeah, Robb Stark wearing Grey Wind's head with the arrows sticking out of him. Yeah. So how am I going to move something like that with my bad back? I've got asthma, too. He took the inhaler out of his pocket, showed it to her. You want to kill me? Making me take the damn TV would do the trick. That seemed to help a little. Bobby, get him a can of soda, the mother said. The boy ran off. She held the front of her robe closed as she sat down on the couch, and Willie could see she wasn't wearing anything underneath. He wondered if she had freckles on her breasts, too. Sometimes they did. I told you on the phone, we don't have no money. My husband run off. He was out of work anyway, ever since the pack shut down. So once again, we're hearing all of this. Everything's closing down. Everything's going to recession. Like things haven't been quite the same in this town ever since the old mill shut down. But here it's the pack, which is the slaughterhouse. I know. The pack was short for meatpacking plant, which is what everyone liked to call the Southside Slaughterhouse that had been the city's largest employer until it shut its doors 2 years back. Willie took a notepad out of his pocket, flipped a few pages. Yeah, and some of you may know, like, you may have grown up in one of these cities or towns where, like, the entire lifeblood ran on one company, like, whether it be a meatpacking plant or a factory or a steel mill or even a coal mine operation or what have you. Like that one industry closes down and like everyone is laid off and the entire town goes to hell. And it's like working at the grocery store, at the coffee shop, ain't gonna bring that money back. So we're looking at a dying city. Yeah, the one horse town. Okay. You bought the thing on time, made 2 payments, then moved. Left no forwarding address. You still owe $2,816.31. And again, this is $2,000. This is almost $3,000 in 80s money. We'll forget the interest and late charge for a TV, right? $3,000 in 80s money for a TV. I want to calculate for inflation. $3,000 in 1989, that would be $7,815 today for an old tube TV. Okay, all right. I needed to do that for myself to find out. So we'll forget the interest and late charges. Bobby returned and handed him a can of diet chocolate ginger beer. God, it sounds gross just saying it. Willie repressed a shudder and cracked the pop top. Go play in the backyard, she said to the children. Us grown-ups have to talk. She didn't sound very grown up after they had left, however. Willie was half afraid she was going to cry. He hated it when they cried. It was Ed bought the set, she said, her voice trembling. It wasn't his fault. The card come in the mail. Willie knew that tune. I don't think it's her. She's definitely was a teen mom. Yep, she. This is a lower middle class family. A credit card came in the mail, and the deadbeat dad went hog wild with it and bought. Made an extravagant purchase that he knew he couldn't afford, and then ran out on her. You know the types. The deadbeat dads, the guys that Maury have to do the paternity tests on. So Willie knew that tune. A credit card comes in the mail, so the next day you run right out and buy the biggest item you can find. Look. I can see you got plenty of troubles. You tell me where to find Ed, and I'll get the money out of him. And yeah, and this is back in the day, like Willie is a debt collector, but this is back in the times where debt collectors like really shook you down. Before the days of answering machines when you could screen call for these people and just let it go to message. So it's like answering the phone brings on every bit of dread because you don't know. But at the same time, it's like you can't just let it ring because it could be somebody important. It could be your mom. Could be an emergency. But no, you pick up the phone and debt collector. The times we lived in before caller ID, right? The dark ages. She laughed bitterly. You don't know Ed. He used to lug around those big sides of beef at the pack. You ought to see the arms on him. You go bother him and he'll just rip your face off and shove it up your asshole, mister. What a lovely turn of phrase. I can't wait to make his acquaintance. You won't tell him it was me that told you where to find him, she asked nervously. Scout's honor, Willie said. He raised his right hand in a gesture that he thought was vaguely Boy Scoutish, like I just did. Probably vaguely Boy Scoutish, I don't know. Although the can of diet chocolate ginger beer spoiled the effect a little. Were you a scout, she asked. No, but there was one troop that used to beat me up regularly when I was young. That actually got a smile out of her. It's your funeral. He's living with some slut now, I don't know where. But weekends he tends bar down at Squeaky's. I know the place. It's not real work. He don't report it or nothing. That way he still gets the unemployment. You think he ever sends anything over for the kids? No way. How much you figure he owes you? Plenty. Willie got up. Look, none of my business, but it is my business, if you know what I mean. You want, after I talk to Ed about this television, I'll see what I can collect for you. Strictly professional, I mean. I'll take a little cut off the top, give the rest to you. May not be much, but a little bit is better than nothing, right? She stared at him astonished. You do that? Shit, yeah, why not? He took out his wallet, found a 20. Here. An advance payment. Ed'll pay me back. She looked at him incredulously, but did not refuse the bill. Willie fumbled in the pocket of his coat. I want you to meet someone, he said. He always carried a few cheap pairs of scissors in the pocket of his coat. He found one and put it in her hand. Here, this is Mr. Scissors. From now on, he's your best friend. She looked at him like he'd gone insane. Introduce Mr. Scissors to the next credit card that comes in the mail. And then you won't have to deal with assholes like me. He was opening the door when she caught up to him. Hey, what did you say your name was? Willie, he told her. I'm Betsy. She leaned forward to kiss him on the cheek, and the white robe opened just enough to give him a quick peek at her small breasts. Oops. Her chest was lightly freckled, her nipples wide and brown. She closed the robe tight again as she stepped back. You're no asshole, Willie, she said as she closed the door. He went down the walk feeling almost human, better than he'd felt since Joni's death. His caddy was waiting at the curb, the rag top up to keep out the off again, on again rain that had been following him around the city all morning. Willie got in and started her, then glanced into the rearview mirror just as the man in the back seat sat up. The eyes in the mirror were pale blue. Sometimes, after the spring runoff was over and the river had settled back between its banks, you could find stagnant pools along the shore, backwaters cut off from the flow, foul-smelling places, still and cold, and you wondered how deep they were and whether there was anything living down there in that darkness. Those were the kinds of eyes he had, deep-set in a dark, hollow-cheeked face and framed by brown hair that fell long and straight to his shoulders. Willie swiveled around to face him. What the hell were you doing back there, catching 40 winks? Hate to point this out, Stephen, but this vehicle is actually one of the few things in the city that the Harmons don't own. Guess you got confused, huh? Or did you just mistake it for a bench in the park? Tell you what, no hard feelings. I'll drive you to the park, even buy you a newspaper to keep you warm while you finish your little nap. Jonathan wants to see you, Stephen said in that flat, chill tone of his. His voice, like his face, was still and dead. Yeah, good for him, but maybe I don't want to see Jonathan. You ever think of that? He was dog meat, Willie thought. He had to suppress the urge to bolt and run. Jonathan wants to see you, Stephen repeated, as if Willie hadn't understood. He reached forward. A hand closed on Willie's shoulder. Stephen had a woman's fingers, long and delicate, his skin pale and fine, but his palm was crisscrossed by burn scars that lay across the flesh like brands, and his fingertips were bloody and scabbed, the flesh red and raw. The fingers dug into Willie's shoulder with ferocious, inhuman strength. Drive. he said, and Willie drove. I'm sorry, the police receptionist said. The chief has a full calendar today. I can give you an appointment on Thursday. I don't want to see him on Thursday. I want to see him now. Randy hated the cop house. It was always full of cops. As far as she was concerned, cops came in 3 flavors. Those who saw an attractive woman they could hit on, those who saw a private investigator and resented her, and the older ones who saw Frank Wade's little girl and felt sorry for her. Types 1 and 2 annoyed her. The third kind really pissed her off. The receptionist pressed her lips together, disapproving. I'm going to try and give her like that old, phone operator voice. As I've explained, that simply isn't possible. Just tell him I'm here, Randy said. He'll see me. He's with someone at the moment, and I'm quite sure he doesn't want to be interrupted. Randy had about had it. The day was pretty well shot, and she'd found out next to nothing. Why don't I just see for myself, she said sweetly. She walked briskly around the desk and pushed the waist-high wooden gate. You can't go in there. It's like the John Mulaney. There's somebody in here. Is that a carnival barker? You can't go in there. The receptionist squeaked in outrage, but by then Randy was opening the door. Police Chief Joseph Urquhart sat behind an old wooden desk cluttered with files, talking to the coroner. Both of them looked up when the door opened. Urquhart was a tall, powerful man in his early 60s. His hair had thinned considerably, but what remained of it was still red, though his eyebrows had gone completely gray. What the hell? He started. Sorry to barge in, but Miss Congeniality wouldn't give me the time of day, Randy said as the receptionist came rushing up behind her. Young lady, this is the police department, and I'm going to throw you out on your ass, Urquhart said gruffly as he stood up and came around the desk. Unless you come over here right now and give your Uncle Joe a big hug. Smiling, Randy crossed the bearskin rug, wrapped her arms around him, and laid her head against his chest as the chief tried to crush her. The door closed behind them, too loudly. Randy broke the embrace. I miss you. Sure you do, he said in a faintly chiding tone. That's why we see so much of you. Joe Urquhart had been her father's partner for years, back when they were both in uniform. They'd been tight, and the Urquharts had been like an aunt and uncle to her. His older daughter had babysat for her, and Randy had returned the favor for the younger girl. After her father's death, Joe had looked out for them, helped her mother through the funeral and all the legalities, made sure the pension fund got Randy through college. Still, it hadn't been the same, and the families drifted apart, even more so after her mother had finally passed away. These days, Randy saw him only once or twice a year and felt guilty about it. I'm sorry. You know I mean to keep in touch, but there's never enough time, is there? He said. The coroner cleared her throat. Sylvia Cooney was a local institution, a big, brusque woman of indeterminate age, built like a cement mixer, her iron gray hair tied in a tight bun at the back of her smooth, square face. She'd been coroner as long as Randy could remember. Maybe I should excuse myself, she said. Randy stopped her. I need to ask you about Joan Sorensen. When will autopsy results be available? Cooney's eyes went quickly to the chief, then back to Randy. Nothing I can tell you, she said. She left the office and closed the door with a soft click behind her. That hasn't been released to the public yet, Joe Urquhart said. He walked back behind his desk, gestured. Sit down. Randy settled into his seat, let her gaze wander around the office. One wall was covered by commendations, certificates, and framed photographs. She saw her father there with Joe, both of them looking so achingly young, 2 grinning kids in uniform standing in front of their black and white. A moose head was mounted above the photographs, peering down at her with its glassy eyes. More trophies hung from the other walls. Do you still hunt? She asked him. Not in years. No time. Your dad always... I gotta try and settle on Joe Urquhart's voice. Something gruff. Your dad used to kid me all about it all the time. Always said that if I ever killed anyone on duty, I'd want the head stuffed in mountain. Then one day it happened, and the joke wasn't so funny anymore. What's your interest in Joan Sorensen? Professional. Little out of your line, isn't it? I don't pick my cases. You're too good to waste your life snooping around motels. It was a sore point between them. It's not too late to join the force. No, Randy said. She didn't try to explain. She knew from past experience that there was no way to make him understand. I went out to the precinct house this morning to look at the report on Sorensen. It's missing from the file, so no one knows where it is. I got the names of the cops who were at the scene, but none of them had time to talk to me. Now I'm told the autopsy results aren't being made public either. You mind telling me what's going on? Joe glanced out the windows behind him. The panes were wet with rain. This is a sensitive case. I don't want the media blowing this thing all out of proportion. I'm not media. Urquhart swiveled back around. You're not a cop either. That's your choice, Randy. I don't want you involved in this, do you hear? I'm involved whether you like it or not, she said. She didn't give him time to argue. How did Joan Sorensen die? Was it an animal attack? No, it was not. And that's the last question I'm going to answer. Randy, I know how hard you got hit by Frank's death. It was pretty rough on me too, remember? He phoned me for backup. I didn't get there in time. You think I'll ever forget that? He shook his head. Put it behind you. Stop imagining things. I'm not imagining anything, Randy snapped. Most of the time, I don't even think about it. This is different. Have it your way. There was a small stack of files on the corner of the desk near Randy. Urquhart leaned forward and picked them up, tapped them against his blotter to straighten them. I wish I could help you. He slid open a drawer, put the file folders away. Randy caught a glimpse of the name on the top folder. Helander. I'm sorry, Joe was saying. He started to rise. Now, if you'll excuse me, are you rereading the Helander file for old time's sake, or is there some connection to Sorensen? Urquhart sat back down. She, he said. Or maybe I just imagined that was the name on the file. Joe looked pained. We have reason to think the Helander boy might be back in the city. Hardly a boy anymore, Randy said. Roy Helander was 3 years older than me. You're looking at him for Sorensen? We have to, with his history. The state released him 2 months ago, it turns out. The shrink said he was cured. Urquhart made a face. Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, he's just a name. We're looking at 100 names. Where is he? I wouldn't tell you if I knew. He's a bad piece of business like the rest of his family. I don't like you getting mixed up with his sort, Randy. Your father wouldn't either. My father's dead, and I'm a big girl now. So yeah, along with all of the plant closures, this is also the time where a lot of the mental hospitals, the insane asylums, were also closing down, and you had a lot of people with real mental issues just being forced back out onto the streets with nowhere to go and nowhere to turn to. Willie parked the car where 13th Street dead-ended at the foot of the bluffs. Blackstone sat high above the river, surrounded by a 10-foot high-wrought iron fence with a row of forbidding spikes along its top. You could drive to the gatehouse easily enough, but you had to go all the way down past Central, past downtown, then around on Groundview and Harmon Drive, up and down the hills, and all along the bluffs where aging steamboat Gothic mansions stood like so many dowagers staring out over the flats and river beyond, remembering better days. It was a long, tiresome drive. Back before the automobile, it had been even longer and more tiresome. Faced with having to travel to Courier Square on a daily basis, Douglas Harmon made things easy for himself. He built a private cable car, a 2-car funicular railway that crept up the gray stone face of the bluffs from the foot of 13th below to Blackstone above. Internal combustion, limousines, chauffeurs, and paved roads had all conspired to wean the Harmons away from Douglas's folly, making the cable car something of a backdoor in more recent years. but that suited Willie well enough. Jonathan Harmon always made him feel like he ought to come in by the servants' entrance anyway. Willie climbed out of the caddy and stuck his hands in the sagging pockets of his raincoat. He looked up. The incline was precipitous, the rock wet and dark. Stephen took his elbow roughly and propelled him forward. The cable car was wooden, badly in need of a whitewash, with bench space for 6. Stephen pulled the bell cord. The car jerked as they began to ascend. The second car came down to meet them, and they crossed halfway up the bluff. The car shook, and Willie spotted rust on the rails. Even here at the gate of Blackstone, things were falling apart. So, applying this to A Song of Ice and Fire, this sounds a lot like the winch and pulley system that the Brothers of the Night's Watch use to get to the up and down from the wall. And here, Willie is using it to get up to Blackstone, which is the name of the Harmons mansion. So, again, applying to Song of Ice and Fire, if there was a House Harmon, their castle would be called Blackstone. And obviously, anytime we're hearing Blackstone, we immediately think of the oily black stone of Ashai, or all of the other weird black stone formations like the fused Dragonstone and things like that. Near the top of the bluff, the Night Fort. I'm going to get to the Night Fort later because there's a section where Willie. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. Let's not jump above ourselves. We'll come to things as we get to them. Near the top of the bluff, they passed through a gap in the wrought iron fence, and the new house came into view, gabled and turreted and covered with Victorian gingerbread. The Harmons had lived there for almost a century, but it was still the new house, and always would be. Behind the house, the estate was densely forested, the narrow driveway winding through thick stands of old growth. Where the other founding families had long ago sold off or parceled out their lands to developers, the Harmons had held tight, and Blackstone remained intact, a piece of the forest primeval in the middle of the city. So, along with the wall, we're also getting the haunted forest vibes that are directly north of the wall. Against the western sky, Willie glimpsed the broken silhouette of the tower, part of the old house, whose soot-dark stone walls gave Blackstone its name. So, a broken tower, just like the broken tower at Winterfell where lightning had struck. The house was set well back among the trees, its lawns and courts overgrown. But even when you couldn't see it, you knew it was there somehow. The tower was a jagged black presence outlined against the red-stained gray of the western horizon, crooked and forbidding. It had been Douglas Harmon, the journalist and builder of funicular railways, who had erected the new house and closed the old, immense and gloomy even by Victorian standards. But neither Douglas, his son Thomas, nor his grandson Jonathan had ever found the will to tear it down. Local legend said the old house was haunted. Willie could just about believe it. Blackstone, like its owner, gave him the creeps. So we got mixes of like Winterfell, the wall, the Night Fort, how the Night Fort was closed, just like so many of the castles on the wall were closed, and Castle Black becomes the main artery of the wall. But then we also got, it's haunted, so you also get the foreboding Harrenhal. This is a grotesque, immense, old-style Victorian mansion that has existed way past its prime. It probably should have been torn down decades ago, just like how the old families, the other founding families, have all sold out their properties and gotten out of Dodge. But the Harmons, this old family, has buried itself in, is just sticking in there. So this is like the old money, the real snooty, pure blood, like we're going to be here forever type deal. We're always going to own this city. The cable car shuddered to a stop, and they climbed out onto the wooden deck, its paint weathered and peeling. A pair of wide French doors led into the new house. And also the other Harrenhal feel is these guys are, for Harrenhal is in badly need of upkeep and repairs, but nobody has the coin to do it. Here, the Harmons present the idea that they have the money to do this, that they could fix this, but they aren't. So it really, So it really makes you question, like, are the Harmons just putting on a front? Are they actually poorer than they want to let on? And that's why so much of the old house and the new house have been allowed to go into disrepair? Or is it more of like the foreboding aspects that they could take care of this, but they're a dying family, and also nobody wants to go up there and do the work? A pair of wide French doors led into the new house. Jonathan Harmon was waiting for them, leaning on a walking stick, his gaunt figure outlined by the light that spilled through the door. "Hello, William," he said. Harmon was barely past 60, Willie knew, but long snow-white hair and a body racked by arthritis made him look much older. "I'm so glad that you could join us," he said. "Yeah, well, I was in the neighborhood and just thought I'd drop by. Only thing is, I just remembered I left the windows open in the brewery. I better run home and close them, or my dust bunnies are going to get soaked." "No, I don't think so." Willie felt the bands constricting across his chest. He wheezed, found his inhaler, and took 2 long hits. He figured he'd need it. "Okay, you talked me into it, I'll stay. But damn well better get a drink out of it. My mouth still tastes like diet chocolate ginger beer." "Stephen, be a good boy and get our friend William a sifter of Remy Martin, if you'd be so kind. I'll join him. The chill is on my bones." Stephen, silent as ever, went inside to do as he was told. Willie made to follow, but Jonathan touched his arm lightly. "A moment," he said. He gestured. "Look." Willie turned and looked. He wasn't quite so frightened anymore. If Jonathan wanted him dead, Stephen would have tried already and maybe succeeded. Stephen was a dreadful mistake by his father's standards, and there was a freakish strength in those scarred hands. No, this was some other kind of deal. So once again, you can see more like the Roose Bolton Ramsey aspect surfacing, a failure by his father's standards. They looked east over to the city and the river. Dusk had begun to settle, and the streetlights were coming on down below, strings of luminescent pearls that spread out in all directions as far as the eye could see, and leapt across the river on 3 great bridges. The clouds were gone to the east, and the horizon was a deep cobalt blue. The moon had begun to rise. There were no lights out there when the foundations of the old house were dug. This was all wilderness, a wild river coursing through the forest primeval, and if you stood on high at dusk, it must have seemed as though the blackness went on forever. The water was pure, the air was clean, and the woods were thick with game. Deer, beaver, bear, but no people, or at least no white men. John Harmon and his son James both wrote of seeing Indian campfires from the tower from time to time, but the tribes avoided this place, especially after John had begun to build the old house. Maybe the Indians weren't so dumb after all. Jonathan glanced at Willie, and his mouth twitched. "We built this city out of nothing," he said. "Blood and iron built this city. Blood and iron nurtured it and fed its people. The old families knew the power of blood and iron. They knew how to make this city great. The Roquemonts hammered and shaped the metal in smithies and foundries and steel mills. The Anders family moved it on their flatboats and steamers and railroads. And your own people found it and pried it from the earth. You come from iron stock, William Flambeau. But we Harmons were always blood. We had the stockyards and the slaughterhouse. But long before that, before this city or this nation existed, the old house was a center of the skin trade. Trappers and hunters would come here every season with furs and skins and beaver pelts to sell to the Harmons. And from here, the skins would move downriver, on rafts at first, and then on flatboats. Steam came later, much later." All right, so this is where I really want to stop. This whole blood and iron thing, right? Okay, so this is where that German nationalism I had mentioned at the beginning comes in. So the phrase blood and iron, and I will again bring up, we'll come back to me and let me bring up the notes. So we'll stop sharing that screen and we will share another screen. Okay, so earlier I'd said Harmon, the names, so the last names of these four founding families are all German and French origin. Harmon, German for soldier, and Flambeau, French for torchbearer. And then to a lesser extent, there are the Anders and the Roquemonts, but they don't really feature much in the story. But the phrase blood and iron that Jonathan Harmon just loves so much originates from the poem Die Wacht am Rhein by Max von Scheckendorf. This was a patriotic poem written during the Napoleonic Wars, which von Scheckendorf served in. So for those who know, I've talked about my ancestry, mostly German and Irish. More German than anything. My father's side of the family, 100% German. My mom's side of the family is a mix of Irish, German, Austrian, Polish, and Hungarian. So yeah, I'm like 3/4 German. And so then the phrase iron and blood and iron, it then gets adapted into the famous blood and iron speech of 1862, made by the Iron Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. And this is in regards to the future of Germany, German unification and German imperialism. Bismarck is instrumental in the unification of the German states into a single nation. Up until the 1860s, the Germans were just the German states were a loose confederacy. France was the main dominant land power in Europe, Britain the naval power, but there was also a lot of influence from Austria. Bismarck saw that wanted to take the German states more under the wing of Prussia. He is from the state of Prussia, and his outlook for a German future was one guided by the Prussian state, not by Austrian, French, or British interests. And it is in 1871, after the Franco-Prussian War, that not only do we get the full unification of the German Confederate States into the modern nation state of Germany, but also the proclamation of the German Empire, which lasts from 1871 until 1918, the end of World War I. This is the Second Reich. The First Reich is the Holy Roman Empire, which lasted over millennia from the years 800 to 1806. And then, of course, we hear about the more infamous Third Reich that the Nazis will strive for. And it's from the Holy Roman Empire, the First Reich, that this idea of a empire, of a German Reich that will last for 1,000 years comes from. So anyway, so the Franco-Prussian War is the decisive factor in this. This is a war 1870 to 1871. It ends with a decisive German victory over the French. Emperor Napoleon III is captured. Paris is besieged for 4 months. We get the proclamation of the German Empire under Prussian King Kaiser Wilhelm I and Chancellor Bismarck. Germany gains the French territories of Alsace and Lorraine, which again are going to be a big sticking factor later on in World War II. And this shifts the balance of power in Europe with from France as the great land power to the newly unified German states, replacing France as the dominant land power. And werewolves end up playing a huge role in German nationalism. So during the vampire stream that I did with David Lightbringer back in December, shortly after the Nosferatu movie came out, we talked about Jews in Germany were compared to vampires, that they were like bloodsuckers and leeches, whereas the werewolf becomes held up as this more noble, legendary creature of Germanic folklore. And then there's also inspiration for German nationalism, which is drawn from a 1910 novel known as Der Werewolf, Der Werewolf by Hermann Loins. And this story is it's a story about a German peasant resistance during the 30 Years' War. So that's in the 1600s, led by a man named Harmon Wolf. And Hitler loved the idea of the werewolf. His code name in Nazi documents was Wolf, and he named numerous bases after werewolves. We have Werewolf in Ukraine. We have the Wolfschanze, which is Wolfschanze, which is the Wolf's Lair, which was in Prussia, and then the Wolf's Gorge, Wolfschlucht 1 and Wolfschlucht 2 in Belgium and France, respectively. There's also the Werewolf Division, the Werewolves. These are the fanatic members of the SS, the Schutzstaffel. These are the guys who went on like the most dangerous, almost suicide missions. Towards the end of World War II, there is a Nazi propaganda plan known as Operation Werewolf, developed by Joseph Goebbels, and this was a propaganda dissemination campaign to try and raise up resistance armies in behind enemy lines during the waning days of the war. This is as the Allies are making their way across Europe and Germany is starting to lose ground, and this is propagated through Radio Werewolf. So Jonathan Harmon is drawing upon this blood and iron idea, and he's using it as a means of showing like how did the founding families make their trade through blood and iron, through the skin trade, which is brings up another Bolton aspect of them, trapping and skinning animals, but also the iron trade. And it's Willie's family, the Flambeaus, who were extracting the iron ore from the earth. So on top of the blood and iron aspect, there's also this blood and soil comes in, Blut und Boden. And that is another thing that comes up in Nazi propaganda, the idea of Lebensraum, that the Germans need living space. And this is one of the defining things that Hitler uses as the means of why they need to invade the Soviet Union and put the Untermensch, that are the Slavs down. Germans need living space. They need to expand. And so George is subtly, because we all know, it should be no secret, George loves his use of double entendres. And so the blood and iron speech is alluding to all of this, not this German werewolf folklore, but in the context of this stories, we're not talking about German soldiers. We're not talking about SS werewolf divisions. We're talking about literal werewolves. But later on, we are going to get more of this, a werewolf behind enemy lines thing coming up when the crimes of the Harmon family and Willie's efforts to expose them become more to the forefront. But right now, we're getting our first big introduction to Jonathan Harmon and his psycho son, Stephen. And you can really see like just more of this creepy Boltonness to them. Plus, like their eyes, the deep blue eyes. The Boltons have those gray ice chip eyes. So George is playing more with these themes of these ice-eyed characters that are sinister and blood curdling and all that. And that is why I said, yes, this is the stream most likely to get me canceled, because I am talking about the Nazis. But it was, we want to explore it. George is a fan of history. World War II is a lot of people are into World War II history, maybe not for the right means. But if we're going to talk about these things, again, we need to be able to say the words we want to use. I'm not going to dance around and say bumbly boo. If I got to talk about Nazis, I need to say Nazis. And then, of course, also, just like how the Nazis bastardize everything, we lose a lot of good werewolf symbology, just like how the swastika was bastardized and the Iron Cross was bastardized. So too is the runic symbol of the Wolfsankel, which really is just a wolf trap, but it's it honestly is a cool looking runic symbol, and it's so unfortunate that because of the the Nazi Party's co-option of it, that it can't be used anymore. They ruined so many symbols and phrases. Just bastardize them. But yeah, so wanted to go into all that. So some quick real quick German history and just a quick summary of German nationalism and where this stuff comes from. But just to show like how prominent the idea of werewolves were in all of this, werewolf symbolism, and werewolves as creatures of Germanic folklore, and how popular they were. So go back. And we'll go back to the story. So, sure. Okay, so yeah. Is there going to be a pop quiz on this? Willie asked. We've fallen a long way, he said, looking pointedly at Willie. We need to remember how we started. Black iron and red blood. You need to remember. Your grandfather had the Flambeau blood, the old pure strain. Willie knew when he was being insulted. And my mother was a Pankowski, he said, which makes me half frog, half Pollock, and all mongrel. Not that I give a shit. I mean, it's terrific that my great-grandfather owned half the state, but the mines gave out around the turn of the century. The Depression took the rest. My father was a drunk, and I'm in collections, if that's okay with you. He was feeling pissed off and rash by then. Did you have any particular reason for sending Stephen to kidnap me? Or was it just a yen to discuss the French and Indian War? So, along with the Nazi aspect here, too, because we're also bringing up an idea of blood purity. And it said earlier, Stephen is a failure in that regard. So we can think of like all the times, like Targaryens, of course, are our biggest example of blood purity in A Song of Ice and Fire. We have to keep the blood pure, the blood of the dragon, yada, yada, yada. But then generations of incest lead to the Targaryen madness, and we get our whole phrase of like, every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. It's implied here that the Harmons have been, if not practicing incest, then at least practicing very, very, very close marriage, probably marrying into the same families, probably cousins and second cousins, maybe not to the levels of full-on sibling marriage the way the Targaryens were, but enough that the ramifications of incest can begin to surface, and that is what we will see with Stephen Harmon. Jonathan said, "Come, we'll be more comfortable inside. The wind is cold." The words were polite enough, but his tone had lost all faint trace of warmth. He led Willie inside, walking slowly, leaning heavily on the cane. "You must forgive me. It's the damp. It aggravates the arthritis, inflames my old war wounds." He looked back at Willie. "You were unconsciously rude to hang up on me. Granted, we have our differences, but simple respect for my position. I've been having a lot of trouble with my phone lately. Ever since they deregulated, service has turned to shit." Jonathan led him into a small sitting room. There was a fire burning in the hearth. The heat felt good after a long day tramping through the cold and the rain. The furnishings were antique or maybe just old. Willie wasn't too clear on the difference. Stephen had preceded them. 2 brandy snifters, half full of amber liquid, sat on a low table. Stephen squatted by the fire, his tall, lean body folded up like a jackknife. He looked up as they entered and stared at Willie a moment too long, as if he'd suddenly forgotten who he was or what he was doing there. Then his flat blue eyes went back to the fire, and he took no more notice of them or their conversation. Willie looked around for the most comfortable chair and sat in it. The style reminded him of Randy Wade, but that just made him feel guilty. He picked up his cognac. Willie was couth enough to know that he was supposed to sip, but cold and tired and pissed off enough that he didn't care. He emptied it in one long swallow, put it down on the floor, and relaxed back into the chair as the heat spread through his chest. You're not using a coaster! You know, Jonathan Harmon is the type of guy to look at that and raise his eyebrows like, that's going to spill. You're going to spill the trace amounts of whiskey on my, what I assume is a nice white rug. Jonathan, obviously in some pain, lowered himself carefully onto the edge of the couch. His hands closed around the head of his walking stick. Willie found himself staring. Jonathan noticed. A wolf's head, he said. He moved his hands aside to give Willie a clear view. The firelight reflected off the rich yellow metal. The beast was snarling, snapping. Its eyes were red. Garnets, Willie guessed. Jonathan smiled the way you might smile at a particularly doltish child. Rubies, set in 18-karat gold. His hands, large and heavily veined, twisted by arthritis, closed round the stick again, hiding the wolf from sight. So even though he's very Bolton-coated, again, the Jon Snow thing also surfaces here. So the head of Jonathan Harmon's walking cane is a wolf's head pommel, just in the way that when Jon receives Longclaw from Lord Commander Mormont, he replaces the bear head that used to be on it with a wolf's head. And the ruby eyes. So Jon Snow's direwolf Ghost, weirwood coated, white, biggest of the wolves, white fur and red eyes. So we're getting this is like a combination of Jon Snow but Roose Bolton. But the Roose Bolton thing is very, very much at the surface. Stupid, Willie said. There's guys in this city would kill you as soon as they look at you for a stick like that. Jonathan's smile was humorless. I will not die on account of gold, William. He glanced at the window. The moon was well above the horizon. A good hunter's moon, he said. He looked back at Willie. Last night, you all but accused me of complicity in the death of the crippled girl. His voice was dangerously soft. Why would you say such a thing? I can't imagine, Willie said. He felt lightheaded. The brandy had rushed right to his mouth. Maybe the fact that you can't remember her name had something to do with it. Or maybe because you always hated Joni right from the moment you heard about her. My pathetic little mongrel bitch, I believe that was what you called her. Isn't it funny the way the little turns of phrase stick in the mind? I don't know. Maybe it was just me. But somehow I got this impression that you didn't exactly wish her well. I haven't even mentioned Stephen yet. Please don't, Jonathan said icily. You said quite enough. Look at me, William. Tell me what you see. You, said Willie. He wasn't in the mood for asshole games, but Jonathan Harmon did things at his old pace. An old man, Jonathan corrected. Perhaps not so old in years alone, but old nonetheless. The arthritis grows worse every year, and there are days when the pain is so bad I can scarcely move. My family is all but gone for Stephen, and Stephen, let us be frank, is not all that I might have hoped for in a son. And this is, again, the Bolton stuff. Roose Bolton, there aren't many Boltons left. All of his children have died. Ramsay's the only things he's got. He has a son on the way with his new Frey bride, but he knows that, one, he's not going to live long enough to see that kid grow up. And two, that kid's not going to grow up. He knows Ramsay's going to kill him. And here, Jonathan Harmon is in the same boat. All he has is Stephen, and Stephen is a failure. Now, the question, though, is why is Stephen a failure? What is this referring to? Is it his mental frame, or what is more? And this is where we're going to get into this. He spoke in firm, crisp tones, but Stephen did not even look up from the flames. I'm tired, William. It's true. I did not approve of your crippled girl, or even particularly of you. We live in a time of corruption and degeneracy, when the old truths of blood and iron have been forgotten. Nonetheless, however, much I may have loathed your Joan Sorensen and what she represented, I had no taste of her blood. All I want is to live out my last years in peace. Willie stood up. Do me a favor and spare me the old sick man act. Yeah, I know all about your arthritis and your war wounds. I also know who you are and what you're capable of. Okay, you didn't kill Joni, so who did? Him? He jerked a thumb toward Stephen. Stephen was here with me. Maybe he was, and maybe he wasn't. Don't flatter yourself, Flambeau. You're not important enough for me to lie to. Even if your suspicion was correct, my son is not capable of such an act. Must I remind you that Stephen is crippled as well, in his own way? Willie gave Stephen a quick glance. I remember once when I was just a kid, my father had to come to see you, and he brought me along. I used to love to ride your little cable car. Him and you went inside to talk, but it was a nice day, so you let me play outside. I found Stephen in the woods playing with some poor sick mutt that had gotten past your fence. He was holding it down with his foot and pulling off its legs, one by one, just ripping them out with his bare hands like a normal kid might pull petals off a flower. When I walked up behind him, he had two off and was working on the third. There was blood all over his face. He couldn't have been more than 8. Jonathan Harmon sighed. My son is disturbed. We both know that. So there is no sense in my denying it. He is also dysfunctional, as you know full well, and whatever residual strength remains is controlled by his medication. He has not had a truly violent episode in years. Have you, Stephen? Stephen Harmon looked back at them. The silence went on too long as he stared, unblinking at Willie. No, he finally said. So, yeah, you see yeah, and enter Joffrey. Yeah, the Joffrey vibes, the Ramsay vibes, the signs of a psychopath early in childhood is torturing animals, and this guy's going 8 years old and he is just ripping the limbs off of a dog the way that some kids would rip the wings off a butterfly. So not only the psychopathy, but also just this inhuman strength. And I mean, it should be obvious by now the Harmons are werewolves, and this whole blood purity thing is keeping it within the werewolf families, aka the 4 founding families. That to keep the bloodline pure, that the Harmons have been marrying Flambeaus and Anders and Roquemonts and back and forth. But Willie, in Jonathan Harmon's eyes, is a mutt because his mother is not from these 4 families, which means it's not so much that his mother is Polish, it's that his mother is not a werewolf. Willie is only half werewolf. Or only half of his lineage is from a werewolf family. The other side of the family, fully human. Jonathan nodded with satisfaction as if something had been settled. So you see, William, you do us a great injustice. What you took for a threat was only an offer of protection. I was going to suggest that you move to one of our guest rooms for a time. I've made the suggestion to Zoe and Amy. Willie laughed. I'll bet. Do I have to fuck Stephen too, or is that just for the girls? Jonathan flushed, but kept his temper. His futile efforts to marry off Stephen to one of the Anders sisters was a sore spot. So again, Zoe and Amy are Zoe and Amy Anders. So they're presumably of the pure blood Anders line. I regret to say they declined my offer. I hope you will not be so unwise. Blackstone has certain protections, but I cannot vouch for your safety beyond these walls. Safety? From what? I do not know, but I can tell you this. In the dark of night, there are things that hunt the hunters, for the night is long and full of terrors. Things that hunt the hunters. That's good. Has a nice beat, but can you dance to it? He'd had enough. He started for the door. Thanks, but no thanks. But I'll take my chances behind my own walls. Stephen made no move to stop him. Jonathan Harmon leaned more heavily on his cane. I can tell you how she was really killed, he said quietly. Willie stopped and stared into the old man's eyes. Then he sat back down. It was on the south side in the neighborhood that made the flats look classy, on an elbow land between the river and that old canal that ran past the pack. Algae and raw sewage choked the canal and gave off a smell that drifted for blocks. The houses were single-story clapboard affairs, hardly more than shacks. Randy hadn't been down here since the pack had closed its doors. Every third house had a sign on the lawn, flapping forlornly in the wind, advertising a property for sale or rent, and at least half of those were dark. Weeds grew waist-high around the weathered rural mailboxes, and they saw at least 2 burned-out lots. So before I had said, think of picturing a modern-day Dragonstone, this is like a modern-day Ashai, right? Where an Ashai, only 1 in 10 windows has a light on. It's so scarcely depopulated. And the ghost, and outside all that grows is ghost grass, and it's as tall as a man on horseback. And here we are, like every third house is where someone lives. So for every 3 houses, 2 are abandoned and foreclosed on. All of this run out, and the weeds are growing waist high. Years had passed, and Randy didn't remember the number, but it was the last house on the left. So another horror movie shout out too. Last House on the Left, 70s exploitation slasher film. Next to Sinclair Station on the corner. The cabbie cruised until they found it. The gas station was boarded up. Even the pumps were gone. But the house stood there as much as she recalled. It had a for rent sign on the lawn, but she saw a light moving around inside. A flashlight, maybe? It was gone before she could be sure. The cabbie offered to wait. No, she said. I don't know how long I'll be. After he was gone, she stood on the barren lawn for a long time, staring at the front door before she finally went up the walk. She decided not to knock, but the door opened and she was reaching for the knob. Can I help you, miss? He loomed over her, a big man, thick-bodied but muscular. His face was unfamiliar, but he was no Helander. They'd been a short, wiry family, all with the same limp, dirty blonde hair. This one had hair black as wrought iron and shaggier than the department usually liked. 5 o'clock shadow gave his jaw a distinct blue-black cast. His hands were large with short, blunt fingers. Everything about him said cop. I was looking for the people who used to live here. The family moved away when the pack closed, he told her. Why don't you come inside? He opened the door wider. Randy saw bare floors, dust, and his partner, a beer-bellied black man standing by the door to the kitchen. I don't think so, she said. I insist, he replied. He showed her a gold badge pinned to the inside of his cheap gray suit. Does that mean I'm under arrest? He looked taken aback. No, of course not. We'd just like to ask you a few questions. He tried to sound friendlier. I'm Rogoff. Homicide, she said. His eyes narrowed. How? You're in charge of the Sorensen investigation, she said. She'd been given his name at the cop house that morning. You must not have much of a case if you got nothing better to do than hang around here waiting for Roy Helander to show. We were just leaving. Thought maybe he'd get nostalgic, hold up at the old house. But there's no sign of it. He looked at her hard and frowned. Mind telling me your name? I gotta try and work on my, he's a cop. It's doing my... Hey, Peter, can I borrow your egg beater? Hey, Peter, can I borrow your egg beater? Okay, yeah, we'll give him a Joe Swanson voice. Is this a bust or a come on? I haven't decided yet. I'm Randy Wade. She showed him her license. Private detective, he said, his tone carefully neutral. He handed the license back to her. You working? She nodded. Interesting. I don't suppose you'd care to tell me the name of your client. No. I could haul you into court and make you tell the judge. You can get that license lifted, you know. Obstructing an ongoing police investigation. Withholding evidence. Professional privilege, she said. Rogoff shook his head. PIs don't have privilege, not in this state. This one does. Attorney-client relationship. I've got a law degree, too. She smiled at him sweetly. Leave my client out of it. I know a few interesting things about Roy Helander I might be willing to share. Rogoff digested that. I'm listening. Randy shook her head. Not here. You know the automat on Courier Square? 8 o'clock, she told him. Come alone. Bring a copy of the coroner's report on Sorensen. Most girls want candy or flowers, he said. The coroner's report. They still keep the old case records downtown? Yeah. Basement of the courthouse. Good. You can stop by and do a little remedial reading on the way. It was 18 years ago. Some kids have been turning up missing. One of them was Roy's little sister. There were others. Stansky, Jones, I forget all the names. A cop named Frank Wade was in charge of the investigation. A gold badge like you. He died. You saying there's a connection? You're the cop. You decide. She left him standing in the doorway and walked briskly down the block. Stephen didn't bother to see him down at the foot of the bluffs. Willie rode the little funicular railway alone, morose and lost in thought. His joints ached like nobody's business and his nose was running. Every time he got upset, his body fell to pieces, and Jonathan Harmon had certainly upset him. That was probably better than killing him, which he'd have expected when he found Stephen in his car. But still. He was driving home along 13th Street when he saw the bar's neon sign on his right. Without thinking, he pulled over and parked. Maybe Harmon was right, and maybe Harmon had his ass screwed on backwards. But in any case, Willie still had to make a living. He locked up the caddy and went inside. It was a slow Tuesday night, and Squeaky's was empty. It was a working man's tavern. 2 pool tables, a shuffleboard machine in back, booths along one wall. Willie took a bar stool. The bartender was an old guy, hard and dry as a stick of wood. He looked mean. Willie considered ordering a banana daiquiri just to see what the guy would say, but one look at that sour, twisted old face cured the impulse, and he asked for a Boilermaker instead. Ed working tonight? He asked when the bartender brought the drinks. Only works weekends, but he comes in most nights, plays a little pool. I'll wait. The shot made his eyes water. He chased it down with a gulp of beer. He saw a payphone back by the men's room. When the bartender gave him his change, he walked back, put in a quarter, and dialed Randy. She wasn't home. He got her damn machine. Willie hated phone machines. They made life a hell of a lot more difficult for collection agents, that was for sure. Oh, so I was wrong. So answering machines did exist at this point. Okay, so people could screen calls. He waited on the tone, left Randy an obscene message, and hung up. The men's room had a condom dispenser mounted over the urinals. Willie read the instructions as he took a leak. The condoms were intended for prevention of disease only, of course, even though the one dispensed by the left-hand slot was a French tickler. Maybe he ought to install one of these at home, he thought. He zipped up, flushed, washed his hands. When he walked back out into the tap room, 2 new customers stood over the pool table, chalking up cues. Willie looked at the bartender, who nodded. One of you Ed Jedeker? Willie asked. Ed wasn't the biggest. His buddy was as large and pale as Moby Dick, but he was big enough with a real stupid, mean look on his face. Yeah. We need to talk about some money you owe. Willie offered him one of his cards. Ed looked at the hand, but made no effort to take the card. He laughed. Get lost. He turned back to the pool table. Moby Dick racked up the balls and Ed broke. That was all right, if that was the way he wanted to play it. Willie sat back on the bar stool and ordered another beer. He'd get his money one way or the other. Sooner or later, Ed would have to leave, and then it would be his turn. Willie still wasn't answering his phone. Randy hung up the payphone and frowned. He didn't have an answering machine either, not Willie Flambeau. That would be too sensible. She knew she shouldn't worry. The hounds of hell don't punch time clocks, as he told her more than once. He was probably out running down some deadbeat. She'd try again when she got home. If he still didn't answer, then she'd start to worry. The automat was almost empty. Her heels made hollow clicks on the old linoleum as she walked back to her booth and sat down. Her coffee had gone cold. She looked idly out the window. The digital clock on the State National Bank said 8:13. Randy decided to give him 10 more minutes. The red vinyl of the booth was old and cracking, but she felt strangely comfortable here, sipping her cold coffee and staring off at the iron spire across the square. The Automat had been her favorite restaurant when she was a little girl. Every year on her birthday, she would demand a movie at the castle and dinner at the Automat, and every year her father would laugh and oblige. She loved to put the nickels in the coin slots and make the windows pop open, and her father's cup out of the old brass coffee machine with all its knobs and levers. Sometimes you could see disembodied hands through the glass, sticking a sandwich or a piece of pie into one of the slots, like something from an old horror movie. You never saw any people working at the Automat, just hands. The hands of people who hadn't paid their bills, her father once told her, teasing. That gave her the shivers, but somehow made her annual visits even more delicious in a creepy kind of way. The truth, when she learned it, was much less interesting. Of course, that was true of most everything in life. These days, the Automat was always empty, which made Randy wonder how the floor could possibly stay so filthy, and he had to put quarters into the coin slots beside the little windows instead of nickels. But the banana green pie was still the best she'd ever had, and the coffee that came out of those worn brass spigots was better than anything she'd ever brewed at home. She was thinking of getting a fresh cup when the door opened and Rogoff finally came in out of the rain. He wore a heavy wool coat. His hair was wet. Randy looked out at the clock as he approached the booth. It said 8:17. You're late, she said. I'm a slow reader. He excused himself and went to get some food. Randy watched him as he fed dollar bills into the change machine. He wasn't bad looking if you liked the type, she decided, but the type was definitely cop. Rogoff returned with a cup of coffee, the hot beef sandwich with mashed potatoes, gravy, and overcooked carrots, and a big slice of apple pie. The banana cream is better, Randy told him as he slid in opposite her. I like apple, he said, shaking out a paper napkin. Did you bring the coroner's report? In my pocket. He started cutting up the sandwich. He was very methodical, slicing the whole thing into small, bite-sized portions before he took his first taste. I'm sorry about your father. So was I. It was a long time ago. Could I see the report? Maybe. Tell me something I don't already know about Roy Helander. Randy sat back. We were kids together. He was older, but he'd been left back a couple of times. Still, he wound up in my class. He was a bad kid from the wrong side of the tracks, and I was a cop's daughter, so we didn't have much in common, until his little sister disappeared. He was with her. Yes, he was. No one disputed that, least of all Roy. He was 15, she was 8. They were walking the tracks. They went off together, and Roy came back alone. He had blood on his dungarees and all over his hands. His sister's blood. Roy nodded. All that's in the file. They found blood on the tracks, too. 3 kids had already vanished. Jesse Helander made 4. The way most people looked at it, Roy had always been a little strange. He was solitary, inarticulate, used to hook school and run off to some secret hideout he had in the woods. He liked to play with the younger kids instead of boys his own age. A degenerate from a bad family, a child molester who had actually raped and killed his own sister. That was what they said. They gave him all kinds of tests, decided he was deeply disturbed, and sent him away to some kiddie snake pit. He was still a juvenile after all. Case closed, and the city breathed easier. If you don't have any more than that, the coroner's report stays in my pocket. Roy said he didn't do it. He cried and screamed a lot, and his story wasn't coherent, but he stuck to it. He said he was walking alone 10 feet or so behind his sister, balancing on the rails and listening for a train, when a monster came out of a drainage culvert and attacked her. A monster? Some kind of big, shaggy dog. That was what Roy said. He was describing a wolf. Everybody knew it. There hasn't been a wolf in this part of the country for over a century. He described how Jessie screamed as the thing began to rip her apart. He said he grabbed her leg, tried to pull her out of its jaws, which would explain why he had blood all over him. The wolf turned and looked at him and growled. It had red eyes, burning red eyes, Roy said, and he was real scared, so he let go. By then, Jesse was almost certainly dead. He gave him one last snarl and ran off, carrying the body in its jaws. Randy paused, took a sip of coffee. That was his story. He told it over and over to his mother, the police, the psychologist, the judge, everyone. No one ever believed him. Not even you. Not even me. We all whispered about Roy in school, about what he'd done to his sister and those other kids. We couldn't quite imagine it, but we knew it had to be horrible. The only thing was, my father never quite bought it. Why not? She shrugged. Instincts, maybe? He was always talking about how a cop had to go with his instincts. It was his case. He'd spent more time with Roy than anyone else, and something about the way the boy told the story had affected him. But it was nothing that could be proved. The evidence was overwhelming, so Roy was locked up. She watched his eyes as she told him. A month later, Eileen Stansky vanished. She was 6. Rogoff paused with a forkful of the mashed potatoes and studied her thoughtfully. Inconvenient, he said. Dad wanted Roy released, but no one supported him. The official line was that the Stansky girl was unconnected to the others. Roy had done 4, and some other child molester had done the 5th. It's possible. It's bullshit, Randy said. Dad knew it, and he said it. That didn't make him any friends in the department, but he didn't care. He could be a very stubborn man. You read the file on his death? Rogoff nodded. He looked uncomfortable. So, again, we're talking about the times, again, gritty 70s, cops on the take, dirty cops, and again, so I think we don't have to pretend like we don't know what happens when a good cop is on the force and is actually trying to do good, especially when a case seems as open and closed, a shut case like this. We got our guy. There's no need to turn over any more stones. Don't make any waves. The 5th victim is unrelated. This Helander kid makes for a very convenient patsy. Yeah, when Ned was handed when Ned was handed the king. Like, don't go asking questions. It's closed. Case closed. Nothing more. He did it. But a good cop goes poking around, and a good cop ends up dead. My father was savaged by an animal. A dog, the coroner said. If you want to believe that, go ahead. This was the hard part. She picked at it like an old scab for years, and then she tried to forget it, but nothing ever made it easier. He got a phone call in the middle of the night, some kind of lead about the missing kids. Before he left, he phoned Joe Urquhart to ask for backup. Chief Urquhart? Randy nodded. He wasn't chief then. Joe had been his partner when he was still in uniform. He said Dad told him he had a hot tip, but not the details, not even the name of the caller. Maybe he didn't know the name. He knew. My father wasn't the kind of cop who goes off alone in the middle of the night on an anonymous tip. He drove down to the stockyards by himself. It was waiting for him there. Whatever it was took 6 rounds and kept coming. It tore out his throat, and after it was dead, he was dead. It ate him. What was left by the time Urquhart got there? Joe testified that when he first found the body, he wasn't even sure it was human. So let's keep this in the back of our minds, right? So Urquhart is currently the chief of police, but back in the day, he was just like any other beat cop, and Frank Wade, Randy's dad, was his partner. Frank gets this tip, decides to go out. He phones Urquhart. This is his partner, the one who's supposed to provide him backup. But when Frank makes it to the stocks, Joe isn't there. He's gone in alone, and conveniently, there's this werewolf. And now we have John Harmon, owns the paper. Willie made that sarcastic remark, probably owns the cops too. And this guy, this beat cop years ago, is now the chief of police. So yeah, exactly, River Miss Faye. Urquhart sounds sus. a lot of people on the force should sound sus. And Jonathan Harmon, obviously sus, and his son Steven, very sus. And this Helander kid, because we said earlier on, Helander's out. Because of the quote, Helander has been released. The doctors say he's cured, but more than likely, given the time, he was not cured. He was more than likely just put out because of lack of funding and the asylum's closing down. And now he's running free again. So a lot of dirtiness going on here. A lot of corruption, and that is why the city itself is in decay. That's like this whole crime noir. Like the police are corrupt. The media is corrupt. Everyone's corrupt. The one guy who's like honest is our pervert protagonist, Willie Flambeau, the debt collector. She told the story in a cool, steady voice, but her stomach was churning. And yes, because as a debt collector, he would be viewed as scum and villainy by most modern day people, like the way that the people will like spit and leave in like their IRS bills. And it's like, at the end of the day, this is someone just trying to do their job. But the respected positions, right? The respected positions of the cops and the journalists and the rich man in the mansion on the hill, they're the real monsters. And this guy who's viewed as the common man, as this scum-sucking low-life debt collector, he's the one good person out there trying to do good and right by these people. Tale as old as time. When she finished, Rogoff was staring at her. He set down his fork and pushed his plate away. Suddenly, I'm not very hungry anymore. Randy's smile was humorless. I love our local press. There was a case a few years ago when a woman was kidnapped by a gang, held for 2 weeks. She was beaten, tortured, sodomized, raped hundreds of times. When the story broke, the paper said she'd been, quote, assaulted, unquote. It said my father's body had been mutilated. Oh, and then, so that's another thing. I'm not here to steer anyone in any kind of political leanings. You take this however you want. But whenever you read like a piece of media, you always got to remember everyone has an angle, and you can see how like certain times when it's a certain victim or the perpetrator is a certain person that comes from a certain class or a certain ethnicity, race, what have you. It can be applied to any of all this. How does the media present it? How do they frame the victim? How do they frame the perpetrator? Everyone has an angle. Like she said, like an assault when this woman went through absolute hell. But then when her father is killed, they sensationalize the story as he's mutilated. Everyone has an angle. And every time you look at a piece of media, you always got to keep in the back of your mind, who wrote this? What's their angle? What do they have to gain from this? Why are they presenting details the way they do? And that's why it's always important with any news story to look at multiple sources and never to just take everything you hear, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. Everything is with a grain of salt. You want to be able to know, like, are these details correct or are these sensationalized? Yes, he admitted. So I've been told her body was intact. She leaned forward, looked hard into his dark brown eyes. That's a lie. Yes, he admitted. He took a sheet of paper from his breast pocket, unfolded it, passed it across to her. But it's not the way you think. Randy snatched the coroner's report from his hand and scanned quickly down the page. The words blurred, refused to register. It wasn't adding up the way it was supposed to. Cause of death, exsanguination. Somewhere, far away, Rogoff was talking. It's a security building. Her apartment's on the 14th floor. No balconies, no fire escapes, and the doorman didn't see a thing. The door was locked. It was a cheap spring lock, easy to jimmy, but there was no sign of forced entry. The instrument of death was a blade at least 12 inches long. extremely sharp, slender, and flexible, perhaps a surgical instrument. Her clothing was all over the apartment, just ripped to hell in tatters. In her condition, you wouldn't think she'd put up much of a struggle, but it looks like she did. None of the neighbors heard anything, of course. The killer chained her to her bed, naked, and went to work. He worked fast, knew what he was doing, but it still must have taken her a long time to die. The bed was soaked with her blood, through the sheets and mattress, right down to the box spring. Randy looked back at him, and the coroner's report slid from her fingers onto the formica table. Rogoff reached over and took her hand. Joan Sorensen wasn't devoured by any animal, Miss Wade. She was flayed alive and left to bleed to death. And the part of her that's missing is her skin. And yeah, exactly. That's what George is trying to tell us with stories like this. That's why we get characters like the Hound, who knows, like, the story of knights. It's all bullshit because my brother's a knight and look what he did. And our heroes are the people who are looked down on society, the bastards, the cripples, and the broken things. But yeah, now we're back to like straight up Bolton vibes. This woman, Joan Sorensen, was flayed alive. It was and someone took her skin. So we immediately think, what did the Boltons do with the skin toots? It was midnight when Willie got home. He parked the caddy by the pier. Ed Judiker's wallet was on a seat beside him. Willie opened it, took out the money, counted. $79. Not much, but it was a start. He'd give half to Betsy this first time, credit the rest to Ed's account. Willie pocketed the money and locked the empty wallet in the glove box. Ed might need the driver's license. He'd bring it by Squeaky's over the weekend when Ed was on and talk to him about a payment schedule. Willie locked up the car and trudged wearily across the rain-slick cobbles to his front door. The sky above the river was dark and starless. The moon was up by now, he knew, hidden somewhere behind those black cotton clouds. He fumbled for his keys, buried down under his inhaler, his pillbox, a half-dozen pairs of scissors, a handkerchief, and the miscellaneous other junk that made his coat pocket sag. After a long minute, he tried his pants pocket, found them, and started in on his locks. Yeah, so my friend used to say, like, Dubs PK, wallet, phone, keys, WPK, wallet, phone, keys. That's what we always carry. The only things carry in your pockets, but Willie's got way too much. He slid the first key into his double deadbolt. The door opened slowly, silently. The pale yellow light from a street lamp filtered through the brewery's high, dusty windows, patterning the floor with faint square tiles and twisted lines. The hulks of rusting machines crouched in the dimness like great dark beasts. Willie stood in the doorway, keys in hand, his heart pounding like a trip hammer. He pulled the keys in his pocket. He put the keys in his pocket, found his primatine, took a hit. The hiss of the inhaler seemed obscenely loud in the stillness. He thought of Joni, of what happened to her. He could run, he thought. The Cadillac was only a few feet behind him, just a few steps. Whatever was waiting in there couldn't possibly be fast enough to get him before he reached the car. Yeah, hit the road, drive all night. He had enough gas to make Chicago. It wouldn't follow him there. Willie took the first step back, then stopped and giggled nervously. He had a sudden picture of himself getting behind the wheel of his big lime green chrome boat, grinding the ignition, grinding and flooding the engine as something dark and terrible emerged from inside the brewery and crossed the cobblestones behind him. That was silly. It was only in bad horror movies that the ignition didn't turn over, wasn't it? Wasn't it? I mean, not as long as you're doing regular repairs and upkeep. Maybe he had just forgotten to lock up when he'd left for work that morning. He'd had a lot on his mind, a full day's work ahead of him, and a night of bad dreams behind. Maybe he just closed the fucking door behind him and forgotten about his locks. He never forgot about his locks. But maybe he had. Just this once. Willie thought about changing. Then he remembered Joni and put the thought aside. He stood on one leg, pulled off his shoe, then the other. Water soaked through his socks. He edged forward, took a deep breath, moved into the darkened brewery as silently as he could, pulling the door shut behind him. Nothing moved. Willie reached down to his pocket, pulled out Mr. Scissors. It wasn't much, but it was better than bare hands. Hugging the thick shadows along the wall, he crossed the room and began to creep upstairs on stockinged feet. The streetlight alone shone the window at the end of the hall. Willie paused on the steps when his head came up to the level of the second-story landing. He could look up and down the hallway. All the office doors were shut. No light leaking underneath or through the frosted glass transoms. Whatever waited for him waited in darkness. He could feel his chest constricting again. In another moment, he needed his inhaler. Suddenly, he just wanted to get it over with. He climbed the final steps and crossed the hall in 2 long strides, threw open the door to his living room, and slammed on the lights. Randy Wade was sitting in his beanbag chair. She looked up blinking as he hit the lights. "You startled me." "I startled you!" Willie crossed the room and collapsed into his lazy boy. The scissors fell from his sweaty palm and bounced on the hardwood floor. "Jesus H. Christ on a crutch! You almost made me lose control of my personal hygiene. What the hell are you doing here? Did I forget to lock the door?" Randy smiled. "You locked the door, and you locked the door, and then you locked the door some more. You're world class when it comes to locking doors, Flambeau. It took me 20 minutes to get in." Willie massaged his throbbing temples. "Yeah, well, with all the women who want this body, I gotta have some protection, don't I?" He noticed his wet socks, pulled one off, grimaced. "Look at this. My shoes are out on the street getting rained on and my feet are soaking. If I get pneumonia, you get the doctor's bill, Wade. You could have waited." "It was raining," she pointed out. "You wouldn't have wanted me to wait in the rain, Willie. It would have pissed me off, and I'm in a foul mood already." Something in her voice made Willie stop rubbing his toes to look up at her. The rain had plastered loose strands of light brown hair across her forehead, and her eyes were grim. "You look like a mess," he admitted. "I tried to make myself presentable, but the mirror in your ladies' room is missing. It's broke. There's one in the men's room." "I'm not that kind of girl," Randy said. Her voice was hard and flat. "Willie, your friend Joan wasn't killed by an animal. She was flayed. The killer took her skin." "I know," Willie said without thinking. Her eyes narrowed. They were gray-green, large and pretty, but right now they looked as cold as marbles. "You know?" she echoed. Her voice had gone very soft, almost to a whisper, and Willie knew he was in trouble. "You give me some bullshit story and send me running all around town, and you know? Do you know what happened to my father, too? Is that it? It was just your clever little way of getting my attention." Willie gaped at her. His second sock was in his hand. He let it drop to the floor. "Hey, Randy, give me a break, okay? It wasn't like that at all. I just found out a few hours ago, honest. How could I know? I wasn't there. It wasn't in the paper." He was feeling confused and guilty. "What the hell am I supposed to know about your father? I don't know jack shit about your father. All the time you worked for me, you mentioned your family maybe twice." Her eyes searched his face for signs of deception. Willie tried to give his warmest, most trustworthy smile. Randy grimaced. "Stop it," she said wearily. "You look like a used car salesman." "All right. You didn't know about my father. I'm sorry. I'm a little wrought up right now, and I thought..." "Who told you about Sorensen?" Willie hesitated. "I can't tell you. I wish I could. I really do. I can't. You wouldn't believe me anyway." Randy looked very unhappy. Willie kept talking. "Did you find out whether I'm a suspect? The police haven't called." "They've probably been calling all day. By now, they might have an APB out on you. If you won't get a machine, you ought to try coming home occasionally." "I talked to Rogoff from Homicide." Willie's heart stopped, but she saw the look on his face and held up a hand. "No, your name wasn't mentioned by either of us. They'll be calling everyone who knew her, probably, but it's just routine questioning. I don't think they'll be singling you out." "Good. Well, look, I owe you one, but there's no reason for you to go on with this. I know it's not paying the rent, so what? Randy was looking at him suspiciously. Are you trying to get rid of me now? After you got me involved in the first place? Are you holding out on me? I think you've got that reversed. Maybe he could joke his way out of it. You're the one who gets bent out of shape whenever I offer to help you shop for lingerie. Cut the shit, Randy said sharply. She was not amused in the least. He could see that. We're talking about the torture and murder of a girl who's supposed to be a friend of yours. Or has that slipped your mind somehow? No, he said abashed. Willie was very uncomfortable. He got up and crossed the room, plugged in the hot plate. Hey, listen, you want a cup of tea? I got Earl Grey, Redzinger, Morning Thunder. The police think they have a suspect, Randy said. Willie turned to look at her. Who? Roy Helander. Oh, boy. He'd been a PFC in Hamburg when the Helander thing went down, but he'd had a subscription to the Courier to keep up on the old hometown, and the headlines had made him ill. Are you sure? No. They're just rounding up the usual suspects. Roy was a great scapegoat last time. Why not use him again? First, they have to find him, though. No one's really sure that he's still in the state, let alone the city. Willie turned away, busied himself with hot plate and kettle. All of a sudden, he found it difficult to look Randy in the eye. You don't think Helander was the one who grabbed those kids? Including his own sister? Hell no. Jessie was the last person he'd ever hurt. She actually liked him. Not to mention that he was safely locked away when number 5 disappeared. I knew Roy Helander. He had bad teeth and he didn't bathe often enough, but that doesn't make him a child molester. He hung out with younger kids because the older ones made fun of him. I don't think he had any friends. He had some kind of secret place in the woods where he'd go to hide when things got too rough. She stopped suddenly, and Willie turned toward her, a tea bag dangling from his fingers. You thinking what I'm thinking? The kettle began to scream. Willie would be a celestial season. Randy tossed and turned for over an hour after she got home, but there was no way she could sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see her father's face, or imagine poor Joan Sorensen tied to that bed as the killer came closer, knife in hand. She kept coming back to Roy Helander and his secret refuge. In her mind, Roy was still the gawky adolescent she remembered, his blonde hair lank and unwashed, his eyes frightened and confused as they made him tell the story over and over again. She'd wondered what had become of that secret place, all of his, during all the years he'd been locked up and drugged in the state mental home. And she wondered if maybe sometimes he hadn't dreamt of it as he lay there in his cell. She thought maybe he had. If Roy Helander had indeed come home, Randy figured she knew where he was. Knowing about it and finding it were two different things, however. She and Willie had kicked it around, narrowing it down. Randy tried to remember, but it had been so long ago. A whispered conversation in the schoolyard. A secret place in the woods, he said. A place where no one ever came that was his and his alone, hidden and full of magic. That could be anything. A cave by the river, a treehouse, even something as simple as a cardboard lean-to. But where were these woods? Outside the city were suburbs and industrial parks and farms. The nearest state forest was 40 miles north along the river road. If the secret place was in one of the city parks, you'd think someone would have stumbled on it years ago. Without more to go on, Randy didn't have a prayer of finding it, but her mind worried it like a pit bull with a small child. Finally, her digital alarm clock read 2:13, and Randy gave up on sleep altogether. She got out of bed, turned on the light, and went back to the kitchen. The refrigerator was pretty dismal, but she found a couple bottles of Pabst. Maybe a beer would help her to sleep. She opened a bottle and carried it back to bed. Her bedroom furnishings were a hodgepodge. The carpet was a remnant. The blonde chest of drawers was boring and functional, and the 4-poster queen-size bed was a replica, but she did own a few genuine antiques. The massive oak wardrobe, the full-length clawfoot dressing mirror and its ornate wooden frame, and the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. Her mother always used to call it a hope chest. Did little girls still keep hope chests? She didn't think so, at least not around here. Maybe there were still places where hope didn't seem so terribly unrealistic, but this city wasn't one of them. Randy sat on the floor, put the beer on the carpet, and opened the chest. Hope chests were where you kept your future, all the little things that were part of the dreams they taught you to dream when you were a child. She hadn't been a child since she was 12, since the night her mother woke her with that terrible inhuman sound. Her chest was full of memories now. She took them out, one by one. Yearbooks from high school and college, bundles of love letters from old boyfriends, and even that asshole she'd married. Her school ring and her wedding ring, her diplomas, the letters she'd won in track and gifts, girls softball, a framed picture of her and her date at the senior prom. Way, way down at the bottom, buried under all the other layers of her life, was a police 38, her father's gun, the gun he emptied the night he died. Randy took it out and carefully put it aside. Beneath it was the book, an old 3-ring binder with a blue cloth cover. She opened it across her lap. The yellowed courier story on her father's death was scotch-taped to the first sheet of paper, and Randy stared at that familiar photograph for a long time before she flipped the page. There were other clippings, stories about the missing children that she'd torn furtively from courier back issues in the public library, magazine articles about animal attacks, serial killers, and monsters, all sandwiched between the line pages she filled with her meticulous 12-year-old script. The handwriting grew broader and sloppier as she turned the pages. She'd kept up the book for years until she'd gone away to college and tried to forget. She thought she'd done a pretty good job of that, but now, turning the pages, she knew that was a lie. You never forget. She only had to glance at the headlines, and it all came back to her in a sickening rush. Eileen Stansky, Jesse Helander, Diane Jones, Gregory Torrio, Erwin Weiss. None of them had ever been found, not so much as a bone or a piece of clothing. The police said her father's death was accidental, unrelated to the case he was working on. They'd all accepted that. The chief, the mayor, the newspaper, even her mother, who only wanted to get it all behind them and go on with their lives. Barry Schumacher and Joe Urquhart were the last to buy in, but in the end, even they came around, and Randy was the only one left. Mere mention of the subject upset her mother so much that she finally stopped talking about it. But she didn't forget. She just asked her questions quietly, kept up her binder, and hid it every night at the bottom of her hope chest for all the good it had done. So, yeah, we're talking like the memories that you bury, the lies that you accept just to move on with life is what's happening here. But you never truly forget. The last 20-odd pages in the back of the binder was still blank, the blue lines on the paper faint with age. The pages were stiff as she turned them. When she reached the final page, she hesitated. Maybe it wouldn't be there, she thought. Maybe she had just imagined it. It made no sense anyway. He would have known about her father, yes, but their mail was censored, wasn't it? They'd never let him send such a thing. Randy turned the last page. It was there, just as she'd known it would be. She'd been a junior in college when it arrived. She'd put it all behind her. Her father had been dead for 7 years, and she hadn't even looked at her binder for 3. She was busy with her classes and her sorority and her boyfriends, and sometimes she had bad dreams, but mostly it was okay. She'd grown up. She'd gotten real. If she thought about it at all, she thought that maybe the adults had been right all along, and it had just been some kind of an animal. Some kind of animal. Then one day the letter had come. She'd opened it on the way to class, read it with her friends chattering beside her, laughed and made a joke and stuck it away, all very grown up. But that night, when her roommate had gone to sleep, she took it out and turned on her tensor to read it again and felt sick. She was going to throw it away, she remembered. It was just trash, a twisted product of a sick mind. Instead, she put it in the binder. The scotch tape had turned yellow and brittle, but the envelope was still white, with the name of the institution printed neatly in the left-hand corner. Someone had probably Someone had probably smuggled it out for him. The letter itself was scrawled on a sheet of cheap typing paper in block letters. It wasn't signed, but she'd known who it was from. Randy slid the letter out of the envelope, hesitated for a moment, and opened it. It was a werewolf. She looked at it and looked at it and looked at it. And suddenly, she didn't feel very grown up anymore. When the phone rang, she nearly jumped a foot. Her heart was pounding in her chest. She folded up the letter and stared at the phone, feeling strangely guilty, as if she'd been caught doing something shameful. It was 2:53 in the morning. Who the hell would be calling now? If it was Roy Helander, she thought, she might just scream. She let the phone ring. On the fourth ring, her machine cut in. This is AAA Wade Investigations. Randy Wade speaking. I can't talk right now, but you can leave a message at the tone, and I'll get back to you. The tone sounded. Hello? Said a deep male voice that was definitely not Roy Helander. Randy put down the binder, snatched up the receiver. Rogoff, is that you? Yeah, he said. Sorry if I woke you. Listen, this isn't by the book, and I can't figure out a good excuse for why I'm calling you, except that I thought you ought to know. Cold fingers crept down Randy's spine. Know what? We've got another one, he said. Willie woke in a cold sweat. What was that? A noise, he thought, somewhere down the hall, or maybe just a dream. Willie sat up in bed and tried to get a grip on himself. The night was full of noises and full of terrors. It could have been a towboat on the river, a car passing by underneath his windows, anything. He still felt sheepish about the way he'd let his fear take over when he found his door open. He was just lucky he hadn't stabbed Randy with those scissors. He couldn't let his imagination eat him alive. He slid back down under the covers, rolled over on his stomach, closed his eyes. Down the hall, a door opened and closed. His eyes opened wide. He lay very still, listening. Yes, because when you live alone, the last thing you want to hear is a door opening and closing. He locked all the locks, he told himself. He walked Randy to the door and locked all his locks. The spring lock, the chain, the double deadbolt. He'd even lowered the police bar. No one could get in once the bar was in place. It could only be lifted from inside. The door was solid steel, and the back door might as well be welded shut. It was so corroded and unmovable. If they broke a window, he would have heard the noise. There was no way. No way. He was just dreaming. I live alone at night and assume most of the noises I hear are my cats. See, I have to make the same assumption, and sometimes it's just hard to accept it, that maybe it was just Damon or Dalton. The knob on his bedroom door turned slowly, clicked. There was a small metallic rattle as someone pushed at the door. The lock held. The second push was slightly harder, the noise louder. By then, Willie was out of bed. It was a cold night. His jockey shorts and undershirt small protection against the chill, but Willie had other things on his mind. He could see the key still sticking out of the keyhole, an antique key for a 100-year-old lock. The office keyholes were big enough to peek through. Willie kept the keys inside them just to plug up the drafts, but he never turned them, except tonight. Tonight, for some reason, he turned that key before he went to bed and somehow felt a little more secure when he heard the tumblers click. And now that was all that stood between him and whatever was out there. Hey, Damon. He backed up against the window, glanced out the cobbled alley behind the brewery. The shadows lay thick and black beneath him. He seemed to recall a big green metal dumpster down below, directly under the window, but it was too dark to make it out. Something hammered at the door. The room shook. Willie couldn't breathe. His inhaler was on the dresser across the room, over by the door. He was caught in a giant's fist, and it was squeezing all the breath right out of him. He sucked at the air. The thing outside hit the door again. The wood began to splinter. Solid wood, 100 years old, but it split like one of your cheap-ass hollow core modern doors. So you get the feeling like, and all he sees are the shadows. So this is making me think of like shadow babies, shadow assassins. And there's definitely someone out to get Willie, whether it be Jonathan Harmon or someone else, whoever is doing these killings. Willie was starting to get dizzy. He was going to be real pissed off, he thought giddily, when it finally got in here and found that his asthma had already killed him. Willie peeled off his undershirt, dropped it to the floor, hooked a thumb in the elastic of his shorts. The door shook and shattered, falling half away from its hinges. The next blow snapped it in two. His head swam from lack of oxygen. Willie forgot all about his shorts and gave himself over to the change. Bones and flesh and muscle shrieked in the agony of transformation, but the oxygen rushed into his lungs, sweet and cold, and he could breathe again. Relief shuddered through him, and he threw back his head and gave it voice. It was a sound to chill the blood, but the dark shape picking its way through the splinters of his door did not hesitate, and neither did Willie. He gathered his feet up under him and leapt. Glass shattered all around him as he threw himself through the window, and the shards spun outward into the darkness. Willie missed the dumpster, landed on all fours, lost his footing, and slid 3 feet across the cobbles. When he looked up, he could see the shape above him, filling his window. Its hands moved, and he caught the terrible glint of silver, and that was all it took. Willie was on his feet again, running down the street faster than he had ever run before. So, finally, we get our first transformation scene. Willie Flambeau has transformed into a werewolf, and it is ripped straight out of the transformation scene of an American Werewolf in London. That is the vibe that we're getting as he goes through this. American Werewolf in London, great practical effects. And it's actually funny because Dead Meat just did their kill count on that movie yesterday, and here I am reading this story. The cab led her off 2 houses down. Police barricades had gone up all around the house, a dignified old Victorian manor badly in need of fresh paint. Curious neighbors, heavy coats thrown on over pajamas and bathrobes, lined Grandview, whispering to each other and glancing back at the house. The flashers on the police cars lent a morbid avidity to their faces. Randy walked past them briskly. A patrolman she didn't know stopped her at the police barrier. "I'm Randy Wade," she told him. "Rogoff asked me to come down." "Oh," he said. He jerked a thumb back at the house. "He's inside, talking to the sister." Randy found them in the living room. Rogoff saw her, nodded, waved her off, and went back to his questioning. The other cops looked at her curiously, but no one said anything. The sister was a young-looking 40, slender and dark, with pale skin and a wild mane of black hair that fell half down her back. She sat on the edge of a sectional in a white silk teddy that left little to the imagination, seemingly just as indifferent to the cold air coming through the open door as she was to the lingering glances of the policemen. One of the cops was taking some fingerprints off a shiny black grand piano in the corner of the room. Randy wandered off as he finished. The top of the piano was covered with framed photographs. One was a summer scene taken somewhere along the river, 2 pretty girls in matching bikinis standing on either side of an intense young man. The girls were dappled with moisture, laughing for the photographer, long black hair hanging wetly down across wide smiles. The man, or boy, or whatever he was in a swimsuit, but you could tell he was bone dry. He was gaunt and sallow, and his blue eyes stared into the lens with a vacancy that was oddly disturbing. The girls could have been as young as 18 or as old as 20. One of them was the woman Rogoff was questioning, but Randy could not have told you which one. Twins. She glanced at the other photos, half afraid she'd find a picture of Willie. Most of the faces she didn't recognize, but she was still looking them over when Rogoff came up behind her. "Coroner's upstairs with the body," he said. "You could come up if you got the stomach." Randy turned away from the piano and nodded. "You learn anything from the sister?" "She had a nightmare." He started up the narrow staircase, Randy close behind him. "She says that as far back as she can remember, whenever she had bad dreams, she just crossed the hall and crawl in bed with Zoe." They reached the landing. Rogoff put his hand on a glass doorknob, then paused. What she found when she crossed the hall this time is going to keep her in nightmares for years to come. He opened the door. Randy followed him inside. The only light was a small bedside lamp, but the police photographer was moving around the room, snapping pictures of the red, twisted thing on the bed. The light of his flash made the shadows leap and writhe, and Randy's stomach writhed with them. The smell of blood was overwhelming. She remembered summers long ago, hot July days when the wind blew from the south and the stink of the slaughterhouse settled over the city. But this was 1,000 times worse. The photographer was moving, flashing, moving, flashing. The world went from gray to red, then back to gray again. The coroner was bent over her corpse. Her motions turned jerky and unreal by the strobing of the big flash gun. The white light blazed off the ceiling, and Randy looked up and saw the mirrors there. The dead woman's mouth gaped open, round and wide in a silent scream. He cut off her lips with her skin, and the inside of her mouth was no redder than the outside. Her face was gone, nothing left but the glinting red ropes of muscle, and here and there the pale glint of bone. But he left her eyes, large dark eyes, pretty eyes, sensuous like her sister's downstairs. They were wide open, staring up in terror at the mirror on the ceiling. She had been able to see every detail of what was being done to her. What had she found in the eyes of her reflection? Pain, terror, despair. A twin all her life. Perhaps she'd found some strange comfort in her mirror image, even as her face and her flesh and her humanity had been cut away from her. The flash went off again, and Randy caught the glint of metal at wrist and ankle. She closed her eyes for a second, steadied her breathing, and moved to the foot of the bed where Rogoff was talking to the coroner. Same kind of chains? He asked. You got it. And look at this. Coroner Cooney took the unlit cigar out of her mouth and pointed. The chain looped tightly around the victim's ankle. When the flash went off again, Randy saw the other circles, dark black lines, scored across the raw flesh and exposed nerves. It made her hurt just to look. She struggled, Rogoff suggested. The chain chafed against her flesh. Chafing leaves you raw and bloody, Cooney replied. What was done to her, you'd never notice chafing. That's a burn, Rogoff. A third-degree burn. Both wrists, both ankles, wherever the metal touched her. Sorensen had the same burn marks. Like the killer heated the chains until they were white hot. Only the metal is cold now. Go on, touch it. No thanks. I'll take your word for it. Wait a minute. The coroner seemed to notice her for the first time. What's she doing here? She asked. It's a long story, Rogoff replied. Randy, this is official police business. You better keep... Randy ignored him. Joan Sorensen had the same kind of burn marks, she asked Cooney. At wrist and ankle? Where the chains touch her skin? That's right. So what? What are you trying to say? Rogoff asked her. She looked at him. Joan Sorensen was a cripple. She had no use of her legs, no sensation at all below the waist. So why bother to chain her ankles? Rogoff stared at her for a long moment and shook his head. He looked over to Cooney. The coroner shrugged. Yeah? So? An interesting point, but what does it mean? She had no answer for them. She looked away, back at the bed, at the skinned, twisted, and mutilated thing that had once been a pretty woman. The photograph moved to a different angle, pressed his shutter. The flash went off again. The chain glittered in the light. Softly, Randy brushed a fingertip across the metal. She felt no heat, only the cold, pale touch of silver. The night was full of sounds and smells. Willie had run wildly, blindly, a gray shadow streaking down black rain-slicked streets, pushing himself harder and faster than he had ever pushed before, paying no attention to where he went, anywhere, nowhere, everywhere, just so it was far away from his apartment and the thing that waited there with death shining bright in its hand. He darted along grimy alleys, under loading docks, bounded over chain-link fences. There was a cinder block wall somewhere that almost stopped him. 3 leaps and he failed to clear it, but on the 4th try, he got his front paws over the top, and his back legs kicked and scrabbed and pushed him. He fell onto damp grass, rolled in the dirt, and then he was up and running again. The streets were almost empty of traffic, but as he streaked across one wide boulevard, a pickup truck appeared out of nowhere, speeding, and caught him in its lights. The sudden glare startled him. He froze for a long instant in the center of the street and saw shock and terror on the driver's face. A horn blared as the pickup began to brake, went into a skid, and fishtailed across the divider. By then, Willie was gone. He was moving through a residential section now, down quiet streets lined by neat 2-story houses. Parked cars filled the narrow driveways, realtors' signs flapped in the wind, but the only lights were the street lights. And sometimes when the clouds parted for a second, the pale circle of the moon. He caught the scent of dogs from some of the backyards, and from time to time he heard a wild, frenzied barking and knew that they had smelled him too. Sometimes the barking woke owners and neighbors, and then the lights would come on in the silent houses, and doors would open in the backyards. But by then, Willie would be blocks away, still running. Finally, when his legs were aching and his heart was thundering and his tongue lolled redly from his mouth, Willie crossed the railroad tracks, climbed a steep embankment, and came hard up against a 10-foot chain-link fence with barbed wire strung along the top. Beyond the fence was a wide, empty yard and a low brick building, windowless and vast, dark beneath the light of the moon. The smell of old blood was faint but unmistakable, and abruptly, Willie knew where he was. The old slaughterhouse, the pack they called it, bankrupt and abandoned now for almost 2 years. He'd run a long way. At last, he let himself stop and catch his breath. He was panting, and as he dropped to the ground by the fence, he began to shiver, cold despite his ragged coat of fur. He was still wearing jockey shorts, Willie noticed after he rested a moment. He would have laughed if he had the throat for it. He thought of the man in the pickup and wondered what he thought when Willie appeared in his headlights, a gaunt gray specter in a pair of white briefs with glowing eyes as red as the pits of hell. Willie twisted himself around and caught the elastic in his jaws. He tore at them, growling low in his throat, and after a brief struggle, managed to rip them away. He slung them aside and lowered himself to the damp ground, his legs resting on his paws, his mouth half open, his eyes wary, watchful. He let himself rest. He could hear distant traffic, a dog barking wildly a half-mile away, could smell rust and mold, the stench of diesel fumes, the cold scent of metal. Under it all was the slaughterhouse smell, faded but not gone, lingering, whispering to him of blood and death. It woke things inside him that were better left sleeping, and Willie could feel the hunger churning in his gut. And so, like a lot of the descriptions we're getting here, this sounds a lot like Bran, from Bran's POV when he is skin changing into summer. Everything is from the wolf's perspective. So it goes to show like that George is this isn't his first rodeo when it comes to writing stories from the POV of a wolf with the mind of a man, or in Bran's case, the mind of a boy inside of it. He could not ignore it, not wholly, but tonight he had other concerns, fears that were more important than his hunger. Dawn was only a few hours away and he had nowhere to go. He could not go home, not until he knew it was safe again, until he had taken steps to protect himself. Without keys and clothes and money, the agency was closed to him too. He had to go somewhere, trust someone. Oh yeah, and John too, and Arya's wolf dreams. He thought of Blackstone, thought of Jonathan Harmon sitting by his fire, of Stephen's dead blue eyes and scarred hands, of the old tower jutting up like a rotten black stake. Jonathan might be able to protect him. Jonathan with his strong walls and his spiked fence and all his talk of blood and iron. But when he saw Jonathan in his mind's eye, the long white hair, the gold wolf's head cane, the veined arthritic hands twisting and grasping, then the growl rose unbidden in Willie's throat, and he knew Blackstone was not the answer. Joni was dead, and he did not know the others well enough, hardly knew all their names, didn't want to know them better. So in the end, like it or not, there was only Randy. Willie got to his feet, weary now, unsteady. The wind shifted, sweeping across the yards and the runs, whispering to him of blood until his nostrils quivered. Willie threw back his head and howled, a long, shuddering, lonely call that rose and fell and went out through the cold night air until the dogs began to bark for blocks around. Then, once again, he began to run. And also, Willie is a lone wolf. He says he thinks of the others. So, in this sense, he's thinking about the other werewolves, the remaining werewolves from like the Anders and the Rockmonts and the Harmons. He doesn't know them. He doesn't want to know them. But that's the thing. He is a wolf without a pack because he hasn't tried to get to know them because of them being like Jonathan Harmon, probably looking down upon him for not being a pureblood. Rogoff gave her a lift home. Dawn was just starting to break when he pulled his old black Ford up to the front of her six flat. As she opened the door, he shifted into the neutral and looked over at her. I'm not going to insist right now, but it might be that I need to know the name of your client. Sleep on it. Maybe you'll decide to tell me. Maybe I can't, Randy said. Attorney-client privilege, remember? Rogoff gave her a tired smile. When you sent me to the courthouse, I had a look at your file, too. You never went to law school. No. Well, I meant to. Doesn't that count for something? I'll sleep on it. We can talk tomorrow. She got out, closed the door, moved away from the car. Rogoff shifted into drive, but Randy turned back before he could pull away. Hey, Rogoff, you have a first name? Mike, he said. See you tomorrow, Mike. He nodded and pulled away just as the street lamps began to go out. Randy walked up the stoop, fumbling for her key. Randy! She stopped, looked around. Who's there? Willie. The voice was louder this time. Down here by the garbage cans. Randy leaned over the stoop and saw him. He was crouched down low, surrounded by trash bins, shivering in the morning chill. You're naked, she said. Somebody tried to kill me last night. I made it out, my clothes didn't. I've been here an hour, not that I'm complaining, mind you, but I think I have pneumonia and my balls are frozen solid. I'll never be able to have children now. Where the fuck have you been? There was another murder. Same MO. Willie shook so violently that the garbage cans rattled together. Jesus, he said, his voice gone. Who? Her name was Zoe Anders. So Anders again is one of these purebred werewolf families. Willie flinched. Fuck, he said. He looked back up at Randy. She could see the fear in his eyes, but he asked anyway. What about Amy? Her sister? Randy said. He nodded. In shock, but fine. She had a nightmare. She paused a moment. So you knew Zoe too? Like Sorensen? No, not like Joni. He looked at her wearily. Can we go in? She nodded and opened the door. Willie looked so grateful, she thought he was about to lick her hand. Because he's a dog. The underwear. We're just gonna drink for a moment. We're reading for a while. Okay. The underwear was her ex-husband's, and it was too big. The pink bathrobe was Randy's, and it was too small. But the coffee was just right, and it was warm in here. And Willie felt bone-tired and nervous, but glad to be alive, especially when Randy put the plate down in front of him. She'd scrambled the eggs up with cheddar cheese and onion and done up a rasher of bacon on the side, and it smelled like nirvana. So does that mean it smells like Teen Spirit? He fell to eagerly. I think I figured out something, she said. She sat down across from him. Good, he said. The eggs, I mean. That is whatever you figured out. That's good too, but Jesus, I needed these eggs. You wouldn't believe how hungry you get. He stopped suddenly, stared down at the scrambled eggs and reflected on what an idiot he was. But Randy hadn't noticed. Willie reached for a slice of bacon, bit off the end. Crisp, he said. Good. I'm going to tell you, Randy said as if he hadn't spoken at all. I've got to tell somebody, and you've known me long enough, so I don't think you'll have me commit it. You may laugh. She scowled at him. If you laugh, you're back out in the street minus the boxer shorts and the bathrobe. I won't laugh. He didn't think he'd have much difficulty not laughing. He felt rather apprehensive. He stopped eating. Randy took a deep breath and looked him in the eye. She had very lovely eyes, Willie thought. I think my father was killed by a werewolf, she said seriously, without blinking. Oh, Jesus, Willie said. He didn't laugh. A very large, invisible anaconda wrapped itself around his chest and began to squeeze. Nothing was coming in or out. He pushed back from the table, knocking over the chair, and ran for the bathroom. He locked himself in and turned on the shower full blast, twisting the hot tap all the way around. The bathroom began to fill up with steam. It wasn't nearly as good as a blast from his inhaler, but it did beat suffocating. By the time the steam was really going good, Willie was on his knees, grasping like a man trying to suck an elephant through a straw. Finally, he began to breathe again. He stayed on his knees for a long time, until the spray from the shower had soaked through his robe and underwear, and his face was flushed and red. Then he crawled across the tiled floor, turned off the shower, and got unsteadily to his feet. The mirror above the sink was all fogged up. Willie wiped it with a towel and peered in at himself. He looked like shit. Wet shit. Hot, wet shit. He felt worse. He tried to dry himself off, but the steam and the shower spray had gone everywhere, and the towels were as damp as he was. He heard Randy moving around outside, opening and closing drawers. He wanted to go out and face her, but not like this. A man has to have some pride. For a moment, he just wanted to home in bed. He just wanted to be home in bed with his primatine on the end table, until he remembered that his bedroom had been occupied the last time he'd been there. Are you ever coming out? Randy asked. Yeah, Willie said, but it was so weak that he doubted she heard him. He straightened and adjusted the frilly pink robe. Underneath the undershirt looked as though he'd been competing in a wet t-shirt contest. He sighed, unlocked the door, and exited. The cold air gave him goose pimples. Randy was seated at the table again. Willie went back to his place. Sorry, he said. Asthma attack. I noticed. Stress-related, aren't they? Sometimes. Finish your eggs, she urged. They're getting cold. Yeah, Willie said, figuring he might as well, since it would give him something to do while he figured out what to tell her. He picked up his fork. It was like the time he'd grabbed a dirty pot that had been sitting on the top of his hot plate since the night before and realized too late that he'd never turned the hot plate off. Willie shrieked, and the fork clattered to the table and bounced. Once, twice, 3 times, it landed in front of Randy. He sucked on his fingers. They were already starting to turn red. Randy looked at him very calmly and picked up the fork. She held it, stroked it with her thumb, touched its prongs thoughtfully to her lip. I brought out the good silver while you were in the bathroom, she said. Solid sterling. It's been in the family for generations. His fingers hurt like hell. Oh, Jesus. You got any butter? Oleo? Lard? I don't care. Anything'll... He stopped when her hand went under the table and came out again holding a gun. From where Willie sat, it looked like a very big gun. Pay attention, Willie. Your fingers are the least of your worries. I realize you're in pain, so I'll give you a minute or two to collect your thoughts and try to tell me why I shouldn't blow your fucking head off right here and now. She cocked the hammer with her thumb. Willie just stared at her. He looked pathetic, like a half-drowned puppy. For one terrible moment, Randy thought he was going to have another asthma attack. She felt curiously calm, not angry or afraid or even nervous, but she didn't think she had it in her to shoot a man in the back as he ran for the bathroom, even if he was a werewolf. Thankfully, Willie spared her that decision. You don't want to shoot me, he said, with remarkable aplomb under the circumstances. It's bad manners to shoot your friends. They'll make a hole in the bathrobe. I never liked that bathrobe. I hate pink. If you're really so hot to kill me, you'd stand a better chance with a fork, Willie said. So you admit that you're a werewolf? A lycanthrope, Willie corrected. He sucked at his burnt fingers again and looked at her sideways. So sue me. It's a medical condition. I got allergies, I got asthma, I got a bad back, and I got lycanthropy. Is it my fault? I didn't kill your father. I never killed anyone. I ate half a pit bull once, but can you blame me? His voice turned querulous. If you want to shoot me, go ahead and try. Since when do you carry a gun anyway? I thought all that shit about private eye stuffing heat was strictly television. The phrase is packing heat, and it is. I only bring mine out for special occasions. My father was carrying it when he died. Didn't do him much good, did it? Willie said softly. Randy considered that for a moment. What would happen if I pulled the trigger? The gun was getting heavy, but her hand was steady. I'd try to change. I don't think I'd make it, but I'd have to try. A couple bullets in the head at this range while I'm still human. Yeah, that'd probably do the job. But you don't want to miss. And you really don't want to wound me. Once I'm changed, it's a whole different ball game. My father emptied his gun on the night he was killed, Randy said thoughtfully. Willie studied his hands and winced. Oh, fuck. I'm getting a blister. Randy put the gun on the table and went to the kitchen to get him a stick of butter. He accepted it from her gratefully. She glanced toward the window as he treated his burns. The sun's up, she thought. I thought werewolves only changed at night, during the full moon. Lycanthropes, Willie said. He flexed his fingers. Sighed. That full moon shit was all invented by some screenwriter for Universal. Go look at your literature. We change at will. Day, night, full moon, new moon, makes no difference. Sometimes I feel more like changing during the full moon, some kind of hormonal thing. But more like getting horny than going on the rag, if you know what I mean. He grabbed his coffee. It was cold by now, but that didn't stop Willie from emptying the cup. I shouldn't be telling you all this. Fuck, Randy, I like you. You're a friend. I care about you. You should only forget this whole morning. Believe me, it's healthier. So this is just like in Fever Dream. Our vampires are different. Our werewolves are different. But yeah, skin changers or lycanthropes, as Willie likes to say, because it's a disease. And I'm not a monster. I'm a man with a disease. Yeah, they can change at will, and that becomes more of the skin changer aspect that George would later adapt into A Song of Ice and Fire. Bran can skin change in the summer whenever he wants. The moon doesn't have to be full or anything like that. So play with this. It's as if, but this aspect, it would be like, what if the Starks, instead of skin changing their dire wolves, were fully transforming into the wolves themselves? Why? She said bluntly. She wasn't about to forget anything. What's going to happen to me if I don't? Are you going to rip my throat out? Should I forget Joan Sorensen and Zoe Anders too? How about Roy Helander and all those missing kids? Am I supposed to forget what happened to my father? She stopped for a moment, lowered her voice. You came to me for help, Willie, and pardon, but you sure as hell look as though you still need it. Birthday, please read. Oh, thank you. Thank you for everyone for the birthday wishes. Again, technically tomorrow is the birthday, the 31st, and we'll be following that up with another stream. I'll be on David Lightbringer's YouTube channel, and we're going to read the Theon Winds of Winter sample chapter. And I'm looking forward to that one. I have a whole big ball of tinfoil to drop on all of you, and we're going to have to unwrap it. And it's a lot to do. Theon, predictions for Theon and for Stannis, because it's a very Stannis-heavy chapter, as well as Fagon. Fagon, a lot of Fagon stuff to come up too. So hopefully you'll join us there. So Willie looked at her across the table with a morose hand dog expression on his long face. I don't know whether I want to kiss you or slap you, he finally admitted. Shit, you're right. You know too much already. I got to get in my own clothes. This wet underwear is giving me pneumonia. Call a cab. We'll go check out my place. Talk. You got a coat? Take the Burberry, Randy said. It's in the closet. The coat was even bigger on him than it had been on Randy, but it beat the pink bathrobe. He looked almost human as he emerged from the closet, fussing with the belt. Randy was rummaging in the silver drawer. She found a large carving knife, the one her grandfather used to use on Thanksgiving, and slid it through the belt of her jeans. Willie looked at it nervously. Good idea, he finally said. But take the gun, too. The cab driver was the quiet type. The drive across town passed in awkward silence. Randy paid him while Willie climbed out to check the doors. It was a blustery, overcast day, and the river looked gray and choppy as it slapped against the pier. Willie kicked his front door in a fit of pique and vanished down the alley. Randy waited by the pier and watched the cab drive off. A few minutes later, Willie was back, looking disgusted. This is ridiculous, he said. The back door hasn't been opened in years. You need a hammer and chisel just to knock through the rust. The loading docks are bolted down and chained with the mother of all padlocks on the chains. And the front door, there's a spare set of keys in my car, but even if we got those, the police bar can only be lifted from inside. So how the hell did it get in, I ask you? Randy looked at the brewery's weathered brick walls appraisingly. They looked pretty solid to her, and the second floor windows were a good 20 feet off street level. She walked around the side to take a look down the alley. There's a window broken, she said. That was me getting out, not my nocturnal caller getting in. Randy had already figured out that much from the broken glass all over the cobblestones. Right now, I'm more concerned about how we're going to get in, she pointed. If we move that dumpster a few feet to the left and climb on top, and you climb on my shoulders, I think you might be able to hoist yourself in. Willie considered that. What if it's still in there? What? Randy said. Whatever was after me last night. If I hadn't jumped through that window, it'd be me without a skin this morning, and believe me, I'm cold enough as is. He looked at the window, at the dumpster, and back at the window. Fuck, he said. Can't stand here all day. But I've got a better idea. Help me roll the dumpster away from the wall a little. Randy didn't understand, but she did as Willie suggested. They left the dumpster in the center of the alley, directly opposite the broken window. Willie nodded and began unbelting the coat she'd lent him. Turn around. I don't want you freaking out. I've got to get naked and your carnal appetites might get the best of you. Randy turned around. The temptation to glance over her shoulder was irresistible. She heard the coat fall to the ground. Then she heard something else. Soft padding steps, like a dog. She turned. He'd circled all the way down to the end of the alley. Her ex-husband's old underwear lay puddled across the cobblestones atop the Burberry coat. Willie came streaking back toward the brewery building speed. He was, Randy noticed, not a very prepossessing wolf. His fur was a dirty gray-brown color, kind of mangy. His rear looked too large and his legs too thin, and there was something ungainly about the way he ran. He put on a final burst of speed, leapt on top of the dumpster, bounded off the metal lid, and flew through the shattered window, breaking more glass as he went. Randy heard a loud thump from inside the bedroom. She went around to the front. A few moments later, the locks began to unlock, one by one, and Willie opened the heavy steel door. He was wearing his own bathrobe, a red tartan flannel, and his hand was full of keys. Come on, no sign of night visitors. I put on some water for tea. The fucker must have crawled out of the toilet, Willie said. I don't see any other way he could have gotten in. Randy stood in front of what remained of his bedroom door. She studied the shattered wood, ran her finger lightly across one jagged splinter, then knelt to look at the floor. Whatever it was strong. Look at these gauges in the wood. Look at how sharp and clean they are. You don't do that with a fist. Claws, maybe. More like some kind of knife. And take a look at this. She gestured toward the brass doorknobs which lay on the floor amidst a bunch of kindling. Willie bent to pick it up. Don't touch, she said, grabbing his arm. Just look. He got down on one knee. At first, he didn't notice anything. But when he leaned close, he saw how the brass was scored and scraped. Something sharp and hard. When you first heard the sounds, what direction were they coming from? Willie thought for a moment. It was hard to tell. Toward the back, I think. Randy walked back. All along the hall, the doors were closed. She studied the banister at the top of the stairs. then moved on and began opening and closing doors. Come here, she said at the fourth door. Willie trotted down the hall. Randy had the door ajar. The knob on the hall side was fine. The knob on the inside displayed the same kind of scoring they'd seen on his bedroom door. Willie was aghast. But this is the men's room, he said. You mean it did come out of the toilet? I'll never shit again. It came out of this room, Randy said. I don't know about the toilet. She went in and looked around. There wasn't much to look at. 2 toilet stalls, 2 urinals, 2 sinks with a long mirror above them, and antique brass soap dispensers beside the water taps, a paper towel dispenser, Willie's towels, and toiletries. No window, not even a small frosted glass window. No window at all. Down the hall, the tea kettle began to whistle. Randy looked thoughtful as they walked back to the living room. Joan Sorensen died behind a locked door, and the killer got to Zoe Anders without waking her sister right across the hall. A fucking thing can come and go as it pleases, Willie said. The idea gave him the creeps. He glanced around nervously as he got out the tea bags, but there was nobody there but him and Randy. Except it can't. With Sorensen and Anders, there was no damage, no sign of a break-in, nothing but a corpse. But with you, the killer was stopped by something as simple as a locked door. Not stopped, just slowed down a little. He repressed a shudder and brought the tea over to his coffee table. Did he get the right Anders sister? She asked. Willie stood there stupidly for a moment, holding the kettle poised over the cups. What do you mean? You've got identical twins sharing the same house. Let's presume it's a house the killer never visited before. Somehow he gains entry, and he chains, murders, and flays only one of them without even waking the other. Randy smiled up at him sweetly. You can tell them apart. You can't tell them apart by sight. He probably didn't know which room was which. So question is, did he get the werewolf? It was nice to know she wasn't infallible. Yes, he said. And no. They were twins, Randy. Both lycanthropes. She looked honestly surprised. How did you know? He asked her. Oh, the chains, she said negligently. Her mind was far away, gnawing at the puzzle. Silver chains. She was burned wherever they touched her flesh, and Joan Sorensen was a werewolf too, of course. She was crippled, yes, but only as a human, not after her transformation. That's why her legs were chained, to hold her if she changed. She looked at Willie with a baffled expression on her face. It doesn't make sense to kill one and leave the other untouched. Are you sure that Amy Anders is a werewolf too? A lycanthrope, he said. Yes, definitely. They were even harder to tell apart as wolves. At least when they were human, they dressed differently. Amy liked white lace, frills, that kind of stuff, and Zoe was into leather. There was a cut glass ashtray in the center of the coffee table filled with Willie's private party mix. Aspirin, Elarest, and Tums. He took a handful of pills and swallowed them. So, okay, Joan Sorensen, paralyzed from the waist down, but after the transformation, after turning into a werewolf, she gets full use of her limbs and her body. So, again, this is another Brad illusion. Brad is our crippled boy, but when he skin changes into Summer, and he has full use of all of Summer's limbs, and he can run and all that stuff, it's why he never wants to leave Summer. It's why he's always so angry when Jojen Reed has to pull him back and bring him back to reality. Joan Sorensen's experiencing the same thing with her transformation. Life is better as a wolf than in her human state when she has to go back to being paralyzed. So, next page. Look, before we go on with this, I want one card on the table, Randy said. For once, he was ahead of her. If I knew who killed your father, I'd tell you, but I don't. I was in the service overseas. I vaguely remember something in the corridor, but to tell the truth, I'd forgotten all about it until you threw it at me last night. What can I tell you? He shrugged. Don't bullshit me, Willie. My father was killed by a werewolf. You're a werewolf. You must know something. Hey, try substituting Jew or diabetic or bald man for werewolf in that statement and see how much sense it makes. I'm not saying you're wrong about your father because you're not. It fits. It all fits. Everything from the condition of the body to the empty gun. But even if you buy that much, then you got to ask, which werewolf? How many of you are there? Randy asked incredulously. Damned if I know. What do you think, we get together for a lodge meeting every time the moon is full? The purebloods? Hell, not many. The pack's been getting pretty thin these last few generations. But there's lots of mongrels like me, half-breeds, quarter-breeds, what have you. The old families and their share of bastards. Some can work the change, some can't. I've heard of a few who change one day and never do manage to change back. And that's just from the old bloodlines, never mind the ones like Joni. You mean Joni was different? Willie gave her a reluctant nod. You've seen the movies. You get bitten by a werewolf, you turn into a werewolf. That is, assuming there's enough of you left to turn anything except a cadaver. She nodded and he went on. Well, that part's true, or partly true. Doesn't happen as often as it once did. Guy gets bit nowadays, he runs to a doctor, gets the wound clean and treated with antiseptic, gets his rabies shot and his tetanus shots, and his penicillin and fuck all knows what else, and he's fine. The wonders of modern medicine. Willie hesitated briefly, looking in her eyes, those lovely eyes, wondering if she'd understand, and finally he plunged ahead. Joni was such a good kid. It broke my heart to see her in that chair. One night she told me that the hardest thing of all was realizing that she'd never know what it felt like to make love. She'd been a virgin when they hit that truck. We'd had a few drinks. She was crying, and, well, I couldn't take it. I told her what I was and what I could do for her. She didn't believe a word of it, so I had to show her. I bit her leg. She couldn't feel a damn thing down there anyway. I bit her, and I held the bite for a long time, worried around it good. Afterwards, I nursed her myself. No doctors, no antiseptic, no rabies vaccine. We're talking major league infection here. There was a day or two when her fever was running so high, I thought maybe I killed her. Her leg had turned nearly black. You could see the stuff going up her veins. I got to admit it was pretty gross. I'm in no hurry to try it again, but it worked. The fever broke and Joni changed. You weren't just friends, Randy said with certainty. You were lovers. Yeah, as wolves. I guess I looked sexier in fur. I couldn't even begin to keep up with her, though. Joni was a pretty active wolf. We're talking almost every night here. As a human, she was still crippled. Willie nodded, held up his hand. See? The burns were still there, and a blood blister had formed on his index finger. Once or twice, the change has saved my life. When my asthma got so bad, I thought I was going to suffocate. The kind of thing doesn't cross over, but it's sure as hell waiting for you when you cross back. Sometimes you get a nasty surprise. Catch a bullet as a wolf and it's nothing. A sting and a slap heals up right away, but you can pay for it when you change into human form, especially if you change too soon and the damn thing gets infected. And silver will burn the shit out of you no matter what form you're in. LBJ was my favorite president. Just love them Cupro nickel sandwich quarters. So this reminds me too of the taboos of the skin changer. This is something that Varamir Sixskins was taught as a kid. So you're not supposed to eat human flesh as wolf. Not supposed to have sex as a wolf. All the things, the abomination, the taboos that Varamir Sixskins broke all of them, and the ones that Bran is breaking one by one. And here we see Willie, the pervert, has definitely broken the taboo of thou shalt not do it doggy style while in wolf form, because he and Joan were going at it as wolves. And one could assume that others have broken this taboo, such as the sex thing, but also obviously the killing of humans things. Tim, it's got a different Tim's got it. What? Okay, I'm not here to kink shame. I'm just gonna kink ask why. But yeah, so this is where we get the idea of the taboos and what leads to the idea of abomination among skin changers. Randy stood up. This is all a little overwhelming. Do you like being a werewolf? A lycanthrope? I don't know. Do you like being a woman? It's what I am. Randy crossed the room and stared out his window at the river. I am very confused. I look at you, and you're my friend Willie. I've known you for years, only you're a werewolf, too. I've been telling myself that werewolves don't exist since I was 12, and now I find out the city is full of them. Only someone or something is killing them, flaying them. Should I care? Why should I care? She ran a hand through her tangled hair. We both know that Roy Helander didn't kill those kids. My father knew it, too. He kept pressing, and one night he was lured to the stockyards, and some kind of animal tore out his throat. Every time I think of that, I think maybe I ought to find this werewolf killer and sign up to help him. Then I look at you again. She turned and looked at him. And damn it, you're still my friend. So we've reached the crux of the story, right? Someone or something is killing and skinning werewolves. Both of our victims have been 2 women werewolves. But why kill and skin them? Well, that brings us back to our Bolton, back to House Bolton, who may, as it said in the legends, may have worn the skins of their victims. And this leads to a theory that I've talked over with David Lightbringer, and he's definitely brought up before. Can stealing the skin of a skin changer help with the transformation? Is that why the Boltons were so fond of skinning Starks? Did it allow them access to a gift that they themselves did not have? In this story, the answer to that is yes. And we've said George never likes giving up a good idea. He retools and repurposes. If it's not ideas or things that he was influenced by the writers when he was growing up, he'll also retool and repurpose his own old ideas from past stories. So the Bolton theory that Boltons were skinning and flaying people and wearing their skins in an attempt to gain access to magical powers that they may have had, it becomes a lot more prominent, it gets a lot more meat to it when we come back to this story, the skin trade. That sort of adds more proof to this theory. She looked as though she was going to cry. Willie had never seen her cry, and he didn't want to. He hated it when they cried. Remember when I first offered you a job and you wouldn't take it because you thought all collection agents were pricks? She nodded. Lycanthropes are skin changers. We turn into wolves. Yeah, we're carnivores, you got it. You don't meet many vegetarians in the pack, but there's meat and there's meat. You won't find nearly as many rats around here as you will in other cities this size. What I'm trying to say is the skin may change, but what you do is still up to the person inside. Stop thinking about werewolves and werewolf killers and start thinking about murderers, because that's what we're talking about. Randy crossed the room and sat back down. I hate to admit it, but you're making sense. I'm good in bed too, Willie said with a grin. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. Fuck you. Exactly my suggestion. What kind of underwear are you wearing? Never mind my underwear, she said. Do you have any ideas about these murderers, past or present? And George did the same thing with Fever Dream, right? Yeah, the night people are vampires, but what they do, the blood they drink, that is their choice. And that is why they look for the cure for the red thirst. But the choice is there whether to drink the elixir or to go out and kill humans and drink their blood. The choice on whether or not to do that is solely with the vampire. And Willie is saying, well, same with us werewolves. Just because we're carnivores doesn't mean that we're eating humans. We can just be like wolves and kill and eat deer and whatever and all the normal shit that a wolf would eat. They still are capable of cognacious thunk, even when they are in the body of the wolf. Sometimes Randy had a one-track mind, Willie thought. Unfortunately, it never seemed to be the track that led under the sheets. Jonathan told me about an old legend, he said. Jonathan? Jonathan Harmon, yeah, that one. Old blood and iron, the quarry of Blackstone, the pack, the founding family, all of it. Wait a minute, he's a lycanthrope. Yeah, leader of the pack. Randy leapt ahead of him, and it's hereditary. He saw where she was going, yes, but Stephen Harmon is mentally disturbed, Randy interrupted. His family keeps it out of the papers, but they can't stop the whispering. Violent episodes, strange doctors coming and going at Blackstone, shock treatment. He's some kind of pain freak, isn't he? Willie sighed. Yeah. Ever see his hands? The palms and fingers are covered with silver burns. Once I saw him close his hand around a silver cartwheel and hold it there until smoke started to come out between his fingers. It burned a big round hole right in the center of his palms. So he gave himself like a sort of silver stigmata. He shuddered. Yeah, Steven's a freak, all right. And he's strong enough to rip your arm out of your socket and beat you to death with it. But he didn't kill your father. He couldn't have. Says you. He didn't kill Joni or Zoe either. They weren't just murdered, Randy. They were skinned. That's where the legend comes in. The word is skin changers, remember? What if the power was in the skin? So you catch a werewolf, flay it, slip into the bloody skin, and change. And there we have it. There's the theory in a nutshell. Bolton's killing and skinning people, presumably Starks most of all, to get access to a power that they didn't have. And we come back to, why is Stephen a failure in his father's eyes? Even though he is a pureblood, he is unable to making the change. Stephen is freakishly strong and he has the weaknesses of a werewolf, but he cannot turn into a werewolf. It'd be like a Targaryen that couldn't bond with a dragon. That's the problem with Stephen. Randy was staring at him with a sick look on her face. Does it really work that way? Someone thinks so. Who? Someone who's been thinking about werewolves for a long time. Someone who's gone way past obsession into full-fledged psychopathy. Someone who thinks he saw a werewolf once, who thinks werewolves done him wrong, who hates him, wants to hurt him, wants revenge. But maybe, also, deep down, someone who wants to know what it's like. Roy Helander, she said. Maybe. We could find this damn secret hideout in the woods, we'd know for sure. Randy stood up. I racked my brain for hours. We could poke around a few of the city parks some, but I'm not sanguine on our prospects. No, I want to know more about these legends, and I want to look at Stephen with my own eyes. Get your car, Willie. We're going to pay a visit to Blackstone. He'd been afraid she was going to say something like that. He reached out and grabbed another handful of his party mix. Oh, Jesus, he said, crunching down on a mouthful of pills. This isn't the Addams family, you know. Jonathan is for real. So am I, said Randy, and Willie knew the cause was lost. It was raining again by the time they reached Courier Square. Willie waited in the car while Randy went inside the gunsmith's. 20 minutes later, when she came back out, she found him snoring behind the wheel. At least he'd had some sense to lock the doors of his mammoth old Cadillac. She tapped on the glass, and he sat right up and stared at her for a moment without recognition. Then he woke up, leaned over, and unlocked the door on the passenger side. Randy slid beside him. How'd it go? They don't get much call for silver bullets, but they know someone upstate who does custom work for collectors, Randy said in a disgusted tone of voice. You don't sound too happy about it. I'm not. You won't believe what they're going to charge me for a box of silver bullets. Never mind that it's going to take 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Which would be a fortnight. It's going to take a fortnight to get the silver bullets. It was going to take a month, but I raised the ante. She looked glumly out the rain-streaked window. A torrent of gray water rushed down the gutter, carrying its flotilla of cigarette butts and scraps of yesterday's newspaper. 2 weeks? Willie turned the ignition and put the barge in gear. Now, we'll both probably be dead in 2 weeks. Just as well, the whole idea of silver bullets makes me nervous. They crossed the square, past the castle marquee and the courier building, and headed up Central, the windshield wipers clicking back and forth rhythmically. Willie hung a left on 13th and headed toward the bluff, while Randy took her father's revolver, opened the cylinder, and checked to see that it was fully loaded. Willie watched her out of the corner of his eye as he drove. Waste of time, he said. Guns don't kill werewolves. Werewolves kill werewolves. Lycanthropes, Randy reminded him. He grinned for a moment and looked almost like the man she shared an office with a long time ago. Both of them grew visibly more intense as they drove down 13th, the caddy's big wheels splashing through the puddles. They were still a block away when she saw the little car crawling down the bluff, white against the dark stone. A moment later, she saw the lights flashing red and blue. Willie saw them too. He slammed on the brakes, lost traction, and had to steer wildly to avoid slamming into a parked car as he fishtailed. His forehead was beading with sweat when he finally brought the car to a stop, and Randy didn't think it was from the near collision. "Oh, Jesus," he said. "Oh, Jesus, not Harmon too. I don't believe it." He began to wheeze and fumbled in his pocket for an inhaler. "Wait here. I'll check it out," Randy told him. She got up and turned up the collar of her coat, and the rest of the way to where 13th dead end flushed against the bluff. The coroner's wagon was parked amidst 3 police cruisers. Excuse me. Randy arrived at the same time as the cable car. Rogoff was the first one out. Behind him, she saw Cooney, the police photographer, and 2 uniforms carrying a body bag. It must have gotten pretty crowded on the way down. "You." Rogoff seemed surprised to see her. Strands of black hair were plastered to his forehead by the rain. "Me," Randy agreed. The plastic of the body bag was wet, and the uniforms were having trouble with it. One of them lost his footing as he stepped down, and Randy thought she saw something shift inside the bag. "It doesn't fit the pattern," she said to Rogoff. "The other killings have all been at night." Rogoff took her by the arm and drew her away, gently but firmly. "You don't want to look at this one, Randy." There was something in his tone that made her look at him hard. "Why not? It can't be any worse than Zoe Anders, can it? Who's in the bag, Rogoff? The father or the son?" "Neither one." He glanced back behind them, up toward the top of his bluff, and Randy found herself following his gaze. Nothing was visible of Blackstone but the high wrought iron fence that surrounded the estate. This time his luck ran out on him. The dogs got to him first. Cooney says the scent of blood off of what he was wearing. Well, it must have driven them wild. They tore him to pieces, Randy. He put his hand on her shoulder as if to comfort her. "No," Randy said. She felt numb, dazed. "Yes," he insisted. "It's over. And believe me, it's not something you want to see." She backed away from him. They were loading the body in the rear of the coroner's wagon while Sylvia Cooney supervised the operation, smoking her cigar in the rain. Rogoff tried to touch her again, but she whirled away from him and ran to the wagon. "Hey," Cooney said. The body was on the tailgate, half in and half out of the wagon. Randy reached for the zipper on the body bag. One of the cops grabbed her arm. She shoved him aside and unzipped the bag. His face was half gone. His right cheek and ear and part of his jaw had been torn away, devoured right down to the bone. What features he had left were obscured by blood. Someone tried to pull her away from the tailgate. She spun and kicked him in the balls, then turned back to the body and grabbed it under the arms and pulled. The inside of the body bag was slick with blood. The corpse slid loose of the plastic sheath like a banana squirting out of its skin and fell into the street. Rain washed down over it, and the runoff in the gutter turned pink, then red. A hand, or part of a hand, fell out of the bag almost like an afterthought. Most of the arm was gone, and Randy could see bones peeking through in places where huge hunks of flesh had been torn out of his thigh, shoulder, and torso. He was naked, but between his legs was nothing but a raw red wound where his genitalia had been. Something was fastened around his neck and knotted beneath his chin. Randy leaned forward to touch it and drew back when she saw his face. The rain had washed it clean. He had one eye left, a green eye, open and staring. The rain pooled in the socket and ran down his cheek. Roy had grown gaunt to the point of emaciation, with a week's growth of beard, but his long hair was still the same color, the color he'd shared with all his brothers and sisters, that muddy Helander blonde. Something was knotted under his chin, a long twisted cloak of some kind. It had gotten all tangled when he fell. Randy was trying to straighten it when they caught her by both arms and dragged her away bodily. "No," she said wildly. "What was he wearing? What was he wearing, damn you? I have to see." No one answered. Rogoff had her right arm prisoned in a grip that felt like steel. She fought him wildly, kicking and shouting, but he held her until the hysteria had passed, and then held her some more as she leaned against his chest, sobbing. She didn't quite know when Willie had come up, but suddenly there he was. He took her away from Rogoff and led her back to his Cadillac, and they sat silent inside, as first the coroner's wagon and then the police cruisers drove off one by one. She was covered with blood. Willie gave her some aspirin from a bottle he kept in his glove compartment. She tried to swallow it, but her throat was raw, and she wound up gagging it back up. "It's all right," he told her over and over. "It wasn't your father, Randy. Listen to me. Please, it wasn't your father." "It was Roy Helander," Randy said to him at last. "And he was wearing Joni's skin." Okay. So I just want to see where we're at. So, all right. So we're at 3.5 hours in. We still got a ways to go. So I think what I'm going to have to do is, because I'm losing my voice and I need it for tomorrow. I think what we're going to have, this story was a lot longer than I thought. It's 90 pages, about 90 pages, and then plus, stopping to talk and comment on things. I think we're going to have to do a part 2, probably, hopefully try and make that next Saturday if I can. If not, I'll keep everyone in the loop. But yeah, I think we're going to have to call it a night here because we're 3.5 hours in. Yeah, there's 22 pages left, but the last half of the last section of the book is a doozy, and there is a lot more comments. This is when we get really, really, really into the Song of Ice and Fire stuff, which is when Willie makes his return to Blackstone. It becomes all sorts of haunted forest and the wall talk, and there's actually gonna be a lot for me to comment on. So yeah, we're gonna have to call it here and do a part 2. So be on the lookout for that. I'll do my best to make it next Saturday. But yeah, I'll keep everyone in the loop. So we'll do Skin Trade part 2. But yeah, thank you for everyone who came out for this one. Thanks for all the birthday wishes. We'll come to David Lightbringer's channel tomorrow. We're going to do Theon, Winds of Winter. We're going to talk about Theon and Stannis and the Blackfires. Stannis is quite adamant about using his Iron Bank loan to hire the Golden Company. So there's actually a lot, and there's talk of Bittersteel in that chapter. So we're going to have a lot to discuss. And I got a huge ball of tinfoil to drop based entirely off of the War of the Roses, which is, of course, George's main inspiration for Song of Ice and Fire. We're going to be talking about Stannis as Richard III and Fagon, of all people, as a amalgamation of Henry Tudor, but also Perkin Warbeck, the Pretender King. And I'll have all of that for you tomorrow. So yeah, thank you again, everyone. Yeah, we're going to call it here. We'll be on the lookout for Skin Trade Part 2, and we'll do the ending of the story when things get hella werewolf division with Willie Flambeau going behind enemy lines into the haunted forest that is Blackstone. So I will see you then. Good night, everybody.